Calling to order the WTA Board of Directors meeting for Thursday, March 5th, 2026. Can you start with roll, please?
Yeah. Buchanan.
Here.
Cotton.
Might be online.
Cotton online.
Can Amber, can she see, do you think?
She can see, yeah.
No,
Yes.
Cotton is not online.
Okay.
Thank you.
Hawkinson.
Here.
Portheis.
Here.
Lautenbach. Here. Lilliquist.
Here.
Lund. Online. Reinsta. Here. Stewart. Here. And Darwin.
Present.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Item C, public comment. Each speaker is allowed a maximum of 3 minutes to address the board. If there's anyone online who would like to address the board, please unmute and do so now. Seeing none, is there anyone in person who would like to address the board? That was easy. All right, item D, giving a lift. A handful of heartening highlights.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. My name is Jeff Benson. I'm the Safety and Risk Director here at WTA. And we've got some special guests from Bellingham Police that are going to share some information with us. So I'm going to introduce Ty Elmendorf, Deputy Chief, along with Joshua Danke, an investigator, and I'm going to hand it over to them.
Thanks, Jeff.
Okay, you're welcome.
Appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem.
Morning, everybody. Thanks for the donuts that were provided. It's you knew the cops were coming. So whoever did that. I'm Ty Elmendorf. I'm the Deputy Chief of the Bellingham Police Department. I'm really privileged to be here for the reason that we're here, which Josh will get into in a second. I wanted to just take a few minutes to talk about the value of the relationship between the Bellingham Police Department and WTA. 31 years ago when I started this job, the first assignment that you had as a new officer was you walked the beat in downtown Bellingham, got to know the business owners, and then you spent 4 hours at WTA. And I got to tell you, as a new officer coming in, I thought the WTA job, I was like, oh my God, I want to be out there doing police work. I want to do this, be a real go-getter. And that was the slowest moving clock in all of Bellingham, those 4 hours, as I walked that terminal. But I really found out, looking back on that, the value that was to police officers and the community that we serve. You not only got to know the business owners the first 4 hours of your shift, but you really got to establish relationships that are long-standing with WTA drivers. Still, many of them are in my personal phone, they are drivers for WTA have a deep impact into the community that they serve. They're more than just transportation. They are a lifeline into people that need that help, that need just an ear to talk to, somebody to listen to. I witnessed the very best of drivers over that time, handing out money so somebody could have a cup of coffee, some lunch. I mean, they're doing total community work, and it was so much fun to see. And I want to give just one little story that shows the impact of that. There was a gal early on in my career that was a total problem child. I mean, we dealt with this person all of the time, was a high user of police services, and used WTA. So when I was down walking the concourse as the beat cop, this person would always come up and, a lot of times had warrants, went off to jail, and I got to know this person well. Just 3 weeks ago, I was filling up gas at Pack Pride, and a school bus pulled up next to me. And this gal got off from the driver's seat of the school bus, and she ran down. She goes, "Officer Elmendorf, holy cow!" And I was like, "Where are we going with this?" And she approached and ran across to the gas pumps and gave me a big hug. And she goes, "Can you believe it that I'm driving a bus? And can you believe the impact that I get to have on kids?" And I thought, although she didn't say it, I thought this was all the seed was planted in this gal by WTA and the drivers that she came across over the history of her youth and growing up. So although that's a school bus and not a transit bus, it's still the same. And I was really, really cool and wanted to share that. So thank you for just the relationship that the police department has with WTA. It is vitally important as we look towards public safety that we have this partnership. And over time, as a supervisor, any big call that came out, we made sure that we called and we had dispatch call WTA, because you're the eyes and the ears for this community on the routes that you drive. And we're going to celebrate that today with a presentation from my friend Josh Danke. So Josh, go right ahead.
Thank you. Ty is always a tough act to follow. So thank you for a few minutes of your time this morning. I just noticed in the world, there's too many people that are ready to complain about things or other people all the time. And I try to make it about 3 to 1 where we thank people. So Rocky, will you come up here, please? A small presentation for you. I'm just going to read a letter about Rocky's performance and why he's a credit to your agency development. Dear members of the board and supervisors, the Bellingham Police Department would like to express sincere gratitude to Whatcom Transit Authority's Operations Supervisor Rocky Hamilton for assistance he provided in an assault and drug distribution investigation. On January 7th, 2026, Bellingham Police Department Patrol Division began an investigation into an allegation whereby an adult male initiated contact with a female minor at Cordata Station, convinced her to go behind a nearby building, and then assaulted her while blowing methamphetamine smoke into her mouth. Initial photos from the incident provided by WTA were helpful to law enforcement, but were of limited clarity for the purpose of suspect identification. On January 10th, 2026, investigators contacted Operations Supervisor Rocky Hamilton to request better surveillance footage if available. Rocky responded to the request immediately and provided invaluable footage. Despite it being a significant time investment, Rocky offered to investigate further to determine where the male subject had got on the bus in case it would help advance the investigation. The following day, Rocky advised investigators that the male had got onto the WTA bus near the intersection of Guide Meridian and Pole Road. This information, combined with some very solid police work by a patrol officer, helped law enforcement develop a suspect that lived near Guide Meridian and Pole Road. The individual was a level 3 sex offender who had served a lengthy prison sentence in the past for rape and sexual assault. This subject was located at home, interviewed, and released pending further investigation. Upon completion of the investigation, the Whatcom County Prosecuting Attorney's Office determined that criminal charges were appropriate. The subject was arrested at home and is booked into the Whatcom County Jail, where he remains as of the time of this board meeting. It bears mentioning that during this investigation, the subject was linked to a separate indecent exposure incident from 2024 and has also been charged for that offense. Operations Supervisor Rocky Hamilton went above and beyond the regular call of duty to help law enforcement. His hard work and skill are deserving of your recognition and thanks. The downstream effects of his work are obvious, but I want to be clear that Rocky has directly affected public safety in a very positive way. Rocky is a credit to your organization and is a great example of why Bellingham Police Department enjoys a good working relationship with the Whatcom Transit Authority. Respectfully submitted, Josh Danke, that's me. So as part of that, I wanted to present Rocky with a challenge coin. That's from the investigations division. So Rocky knows what that means to law enforcement from his prior history in law enforcement. We don't give those away easily. They, amongst police officers, it's usually given for valor, exceptional service, camaraderie, things like that. So that's from the Detectives Bureau, from me to you. Appreciate your extra work and your exceptional contribution to public safety on that day. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
All right. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff.
I've got one more thing to cover. George Henderson, will you come up, please?
He said hi.
George Henderson is one of our transit safety officers, and he's been here about 9 years. We started our transit safety officer program about 2.5 years ago. And I just wanted to share a brief story regarding some of George's quick thinking and great work that he does for our community. So on February 2nd, approximately 3:20 in the afternoon, George was called to our downtown station's men's bathroom with a young man that was unresponsive. We had our bathroom attendants that were our security folks that are there briefly during the day. Call George. George shows up to the bathroom, determines that the young man is unconscious and there is evidence of some drug use. George started CPR, administered some Narcan to the young man, and continued with CPR chest compressions for several minutes. And in the meantime, we had EMS coming. We had called 911. And so George was performing CPR without any luck. He then administered a second shot of naloxone or Narcan, and the young man became responsive. And EMS showed up, transported the young man, and George basically saved this young man's life on February 2nd. And I just wanted to recognize that good work that George brings to the table every day. And he's very dedicated to his job and committed to the community. And we certainly appreciate having him on our staff. Congratulations.
I'm sorry, I'll buy you lunch.
Thank you.
I like starting with feel good stuff. All right, D2, Whatcom Land Trust, Whatcom Million Trees.
Yeah, I'll do just a quick introduction. I believe we have Alex Jeffers from Whatcom Land Trust online, or at least hopefully he's out of town and had kindly agreed to log in. But we also have Susan from Million Trees Project here as well. And what we were hoping to do is just touch base with the board. We've now for 2 years had the program to invest in partnership with the Land Trust and the Million Trees Foundation to preserve old growth forest and lands to offset our carbon footprint. To date, we've preserved about 70 acres, which according to studies have shown that it takes about 4.5 conventional buses with diesel off the road or offsets those. Or 4.5. So wanted to have Alex and Susan just touch base as kind of an update to the board as you've chosen to invest in that, and we have another $150,000 in there to purchase or help purchase a third piece of property this year. So I wanted to kind of give just a programmatic update on where things are. I can't tell, Alex, if you're online.
Yeah. Hey, everybody,
okay.
I am here.
Great, thank you. And Susan, I'll switch places with you so you can come up here and.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Important.
You are.
Alex, do you want to start or would you like me to?
Sure, I could give a little bit of an overview of the projects that we've done so far over the last few years. And I also just wanted to start off by saying thanks to the board. I mean, this is an incredible way of investing, both in sort of the offset of some of the impacts of running buses, but also, you know, a way of investing in the community as well. I mean, it's something that I'll honestly say I'm just like really grateful for having an organization like WTA here in our community that's really being thoughtful about not just wanting to sort of do the bare minimum of sort of offsetting things, but looking at ways that how that can have co-benefits with our community as well. And so both of the projects that we've worked on so far, I think exemplify that really well. They've been projects that, you know, the first one was west of Ferndale near the Lake Terrell area, right along Lake Terrell. And it was expanding an existing preserve that the Land Trust had preserved 30 years ago, adding an additional 50 acres. And, you know, that project gave an opportunity both for preserving a large amount of forest land that was existing on that property, but also an opportunity to do some reforestation and planting trees as well. And having that mix of strategies is really something that sort of speaks to the offsetting potential for some of these areas, right? It's not just preventing the loss of these, you know, carbon sinks, these natural carbon sinks, but also improving, right? And finding ways that we can improve that. That property also being close to Ferndale gave a lot of opportunity for us we engage with a lot of school groups. We've engaged with local tribes. We've engaged with local companies to get folks out on that property and help with that reforestation work. We're going to be partnering with Whatcom Million Trees to be able to do some more of that. But in the property that we've already had out there for 30 years, that's something that we've used that one quite a bit for. So it was a really great opportunity for us to sort of get that habitat benefit, get those carbon benefits, you know, have some of that community benefit as well, and sort of bring it all together in one project that, you know, you all really were instrumental in making possible. The second year we then worked with Explorations Academy up in the Everson area. And that was another one that, there had been a massive effort of reforestation on that property over the last couple decades that the previous landowners were working there. They had planted thousands of trees, I think upwards of about 5,000 trees in partnership with the conservation district there. And being able to protect those trees that were growing on that property and having them not being taken down and sort of cutting, literally the process of carbon sequestration on that property was really valuable. There was also existing mature forest there. And the Explorations Academy students are engaging in restoration on that property themselves. They're doing restoration planning. They're going to be working on planting trees, and they're using that as a field campus that they're going to be hosting community events out there that are going to sort of bring the community together. And we have education, we have wildlife habitat, salmon habitat, we've got community benefit, we've got carbon sequestration. And I think these are the things that we really like to projects that we like to bring, is that what are the ones that have really sort of those community co-benefits as well as the carbon sequestration benefits as well. So those are the two projects that we've done so far. I want to give some space for Susan to be able to chat from the Million Trees perspective as well, who's been another incredible partner in making these happen.
I also just wanted to add my thanks to be able to come and talk to you about this work that you've enabled. As Alex said, we were involved in participating in each of these two acquisitions. Our part, and I should just qualify that to say I've been here for a year, so I just stepped in to take the bow. I didn't actually do any of the work that made this possible, but we stepped in and we were able to do the carbon calculations to confirm what these acquisitions were able to provide. And from our perspective, we think about the trees because they not only provide sustainability benefits and the benefits of the ecosystem, biodiversity, water filtration, and of course they sequester carbon. And our role was to come in and estimate how much carbon was sequestered by that. And the properties you helped to purchase protected 13,625 trees, and as Les said, offset annual emissions of 4.5 buses and all of WTA's administrative and support vehicles, plus the estimated carbon pollution from charging 12 electric buses. So it was a significant thing that you did. And I just wanted to amend to what Alex was saying about the Kinney Creek property, which was the property out in Everson. The people who had purchased that property were, their names were Susan and Burton J, and their son, Michael J, was a science teacher in the community. And his parents acquired this property and put a lot of energy and effort and brought in a lot of community partners to help to rehabilitate the project. And now these students are coming in and they have this model of somebody who invested in the community and they're able to continue that legacy. And that kind of thing is only possible because you made the investment here and didn't send the money off to some anonymous carbon fund somewhere. It happened here. And so what happens here just continues to feed the community. We're really grateful for all of that. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Susan. Thanks, Alex. This is, and we'll talk a little bit about this later on the WTA Foundation and our approach. This is part of our decarbonization strategy that the board approved, doing the offsets. And what we try to do in our approach is also look for that's our primary intended outcome, but also what are second and third order effects that we can combine and leverage those things to get broader things. So like the Explorations Academy is a great example of it's achieving our intended outcome, but it also has second and third order effects of doing these other things. So it leverages those dollars and makes them go even farther and have a greater impact. And that's thanks to you all for having that vision and doing that. So just wanted to thank Susan and Alex and have them talk about the meaning of your investment in that and where it's going. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's a meeting.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Thanks, Alex. Travel safe.
Yep.
All right. Item E, closed session. The board will now meet in closed session for a collective bargaining update as allowed by RCW 42.30.140 E. The board will be in closed session for approximately 10 minutes until 8:31 a.m.
You guys helping out?
All right, I call the regular meeting back to order. Item at board action, approval of reserve policy revisions. Shonda.
Hi, good morning, everyone. We are seeking approval of the revised WTA reserve policy that is in your packet along with the current policy. Just for some background, we currently have 3 reserve funds established. Our operating reserve, which is sort of essentially our rainy day fund to pay regular operating expenses, the capital improvement for capital items, and then our fleet reserve to replace our revenue vehicles. And that policy was last updated in December. With the change to start drawing the federal formula funds, the 5307, we needed to update the policy. And so we have a couple of additional changes to propose. And these are really just kind of naming conventions for the way that we'll store our money. The first is our daily operating fund. We have that now. It's our daily checkbook that we pay our expenses out of. And we would maintain this fund, we propose at $10 million. And then anything above the $10 million would be in a strategic reserve that would allow us to try different things like different service, experiment with different programs. And some of those take longer than a year to evaluate. So we would be able to dedicate money to work on these projects. Those projects and where we would spend the money would come back to the board for approval during the budget process. We'd have the money set aside and then we would work with the board to determine which are the best projects. And then the amount that is available for the strategic reserve, we're going to report on that twice a year after we close our books. Currently, as of March, we don't have anything above the $10 million to be able to go into the strategic reserve. We haven't drawn down the federal formula funds yet this year, so that will change as the year goes through. And we'll report back on that in September. Happy to answer any questions. Unless you want to add anything.
Just to make sure that so we've got the daily operating fund, and then we fund the operating reserve, we fund the capital improvement, and we fund the fleet, and then anything left above that is the strategic
Yes, you're
reserve.
correct. I missed that. So we would fund all of the reserves we have now, and then anything left would go into the strategic.
Michael?
So I'm trying to figure out where the 10 million comes from for the daily operating fund, because that's not the reserve, that's just the cash flowing. I think when we approve the expenditures, there's usually anywhere from $2 to $3.5 million.
Correct.
Not 10 million every month. So 10 million seems like more than you need for cash flow. Not that I plan on spending it, but I'm just wondering why we would call all 10 of it as operating fund.
We did that. We looked at our monthly expenses, and those are growing. Our payroll continues to grow. We wanted to have a little room for some additional things that may come up during that time frame, which could or could not be part of the budget amendment that you will see. If we feel like that is too much money, we can look at that. Currently, we have about $5 million in the daily operating fund. And to make payroll and some expenses, we have had actually to transfer money in from the fleet reserve. So we're a bit I think it's a timing issue. So right now we don't have the 10 million. We're borrowing money from the fleet, but that's because we haven't been able to draw down the federal formula funds. So this is a bit of a unique scenario where the 10 million, we would not have had to transfer those dollars. So that provides us some cushion.
So ignoring any transactions that would come from fleet reserve or capital reserve.
Correct.
What is our biggest fund in yet?
Oh, I don't have that information with me. I have to get back to you.
I mean, I'm just wondering 10 million is too high. If we make it lower, all that does is shifts those same dollars into strategic reserve. It doesn't spend it, it just relabels it.
Correct. If we need, however, we do that and we need additional money in the operating reserve, we're going to have to transfer it in and borrow it from somewhere. So it would come from the strategic. So those two would flow back and forth together.
I have a question. I guess you said we don't have, using this proposed policy, we don't have any money for the strategic reserve. Is that what you said?
Not at this point in time.
And how much money do we have in reserve? Is it like 60 million?
It's 42 million
42.
that we have within the three reserve funds now.
42 million in reserve, and that's our baseline.
It is, can I add to that? So we did actually beef up the fleet reserve because with the policy change with the federal formula money, I'm going to probably steal a little less his thunder here. We fully funded that with what we would expect we would get from the federal formula money this year. So we front loaded it. What we have found out is that the way that our assumption of what expenses, past expenses we can use to draw down that money, the FTA and WTA were a little bit surprised. We've never done this before. We got information from the FTA that wasn't exactly accurate. So we cannot use past expenses to draw that money. We can only use 26 expenses, so we're behind. So we front loaded that. So what we could do, this is a little weedy. We could take money out of the fleet and put it back in the operating to match the 5307 money we'll actually be able to get this year. Does that help?
I need a graph.
Yeah.
I'm kind of like Scott. It'd be a lot easier if we had some.
Bring us back. There's
Yeah,
no.
why don't we table this and we'll do some more work and we'll bring it back.
I guess,
And-
yeah, show us what we have and then show us what it will be.
Yeah, we can
in some
graphically-
kind of graphic form so
Yeah.
that,
Perfect, let's do that.
yeah.
So,
Okay.
and just one thing on the 5307, we're still getting the same amount of money as expected. The FTAs.
It's just the timing.
Yeah, it just will come over this year and next year as opposed to it all coming in this year. So it's the same amount of money. It's just we have to do it over 2 years instead of one.
And actually, you all have a good point. Like we prepared this before we knew that. So maybe I should have pulled it in and done some more work. So we'll do more work and bring it back.
Michael?
I'm happy to see it now, even if we don't approve it, because I'm thinking about it.
Okay.
Again, the point I was trying to make is I don't want us to put padding around our padding.
Mm.
Reserves are already there as padding. If we do cash flow, $5-8 billion a month, maybe 10 is not too big. As I said, all it's going to do is just relabel it on the graph that we'll see. It'll just be a different color. I'm not actually planning on spending it or,
Yeah,
going out on the spending spree because the money's now labeled orange on the graph instead of blue. I just want to kind of label it correctly.
These two, the daily operating fund, strategic reserve are not same reserve as the others that require going to putting a separate fund and a price and having the treasurer manage it and all those kinds of things. These would be internal bookkeeping kinds of things. The concern was, and one of the things we learned from having to cash flow and carry $20 million when that's when reimbursing us, is I didn't want to be kind of asset rich and cash poor, and Sean and I were trying to think through how do we always make sure that we can cash flow things. And so that was the intent behind it. We'll bring a graphic and these great questions that'll help us refine that. And so we'll do that and bring it back.
Great.
Okay.
All right. Item G, board action items, consent agenda.
Move approval.
Second. Right, we have a motion and second to approve the consent agenda. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? That passes. Item H, board reports and discussion. WTA Foundation, what?
Yes, yeah, thank you. Amber, if you wouldn't mind pulling up the slide deck at your convenience, please. Amber kindly agreed to run the slides because otherwise we'd be here for 6 hours as I try to share my screen. So thanks to Amber. This you may recall we started this last year, and this is the intent of this is just to talk with the board about our strategic foundation, our approach, and then just provide some facts of things about fleet service and our people and those kinds of things, just so there's a kind of a baseline. And also provide an opportunity for the board to vector us if our approach is each changing or any of those kinds of things. So Next slide, please. So that's kind of the agenda we'll talk about is our foundation, what our approach is, and then hit some of the facts on service and fleet, finance and people. Next slide, please. And there's the foundation. Next slide, please. So this is just a, excuse me, kind of the overall governance slide, board members on there, kind of a quick overview of WTA and our core capability on the service thing. And then also what are if we're doing these services correctly in our mission and so forth, what are the intended outcomes along with what our priorities are. As was highlighted, what we try to do, and the reason why it's intended outcomes is there are also second and third order effects that come with things. And so this is what we're intending to do. And then, but we're always trying to look for how do we leverage those intended outcomes to go farther and do other things. And so like with our intended outcome is offset as part of our carbon our decarbonization strategy, but how can we leverage that with others to go farther and do more? So that's why the word intended outcomes is there. And then the priorities, as I mentioned, these are things we've talked about before. So I'll just pause for a second so people can read them. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, our mission and purpose, as you'll see, this is our purpose, why we exist, is to connect people to opportunity. That's the whole foundation for us. And then our mission is to enhance our community. And then the means and methods by which we do that are our core capability, which is providing the safe, reliable, efficient, friendly service. As we've talked about, and then we're trying to look at things through environmentally sound, try to be innovative, and then how do we partner with others to improve the community. And you've heard two this morning, BPD, I think implied third is the fire department with EMS coming to help, how to be eyes and ears as an example of that out in the community. And then with the decarbonization strategy. So that's kind of the lens with which we're moving things through. So that's where we're always trying to head. So next slide, please. And now talk a little bit about our approach. I think this is an important thing for us to constantly remind ourselves on how we approach things. What we're trying to do, things are not just a series of activities, but rather we're trying to accomplish a coordinated, synchronized series of intended outcomes. So this approach is what goes into it. Excuse me. Next slide, please, Amber. So this one we talked a little bit about last year. You may recall I've been through a couple of hurricanes, and one of the things I find fascinating is you'll look and you'll see some trees like they bend all the way over and the top of the tree is touching the ground. And then at the eye or afterwards, they're back up straight and fine. Other trees snap and break and pull out of the ground and so forth. And it caused me to wonder, like, okay, is there any lessons from that? Like, why does that happen? And so one of the things in doing they use the term flourish. And I thought that had a really nice kind of ring to it from an organizational standpoint, because the Merriam-Webster definition of that said the definition of flourish is to achieve success and prosper. And I thought that's okay. That's kind of what we are all trying to do as organizations. In using this tree analogy, okay, how does that tree flourish, and how does it withstand the winds and the storms and the drought? For those of you that may have driven over like Highway 2 and you see some singed trees that are sprouting and coming back, how does that work? And how does that analyze to us? What are the takeaways? So looking at that, some of the things I came across were strong roots and I'll say a favorable environment. And so that caused us to think about, okay, how do we influence those things? So looking at the strong roots as kind of internal things. What are those things that we can do to make sure our folks, our character, our integrity, values, our financial management that we were just kind of talking about, all equal that strong culture and give us that strong roots. Because we know things are going to happen that are going to be tough, and winds are going to blow and storms are going to come through. But how do we develop that strong roots structure? And then obviously around trees, if you have poor soils or you're not getting the water or the sun, those kinds of things, things won't work. And so what's the environment? And so kind of looking at that as the external thing, what are those things that we need to work on? Some of these things are outside of your control, but yet there are things that you can anticipate, look ahead on, and how do you prepare for those? So things like the legislative environment, that's why we spend time on that, is looking at things because that can provide barriers to accomplishing things. And so that can affect your operating environment. So working on those and just some of the other things. And what that really kind of drives is on that partnership thing, is how do we work with folks in a partnering way, not a transactional way, where it's a one-off kind of thing and then you move on, but rather we're an organization that's going to be around for a long time and most of our partners are the same. And how do we work on that to make sure that those are strong on that? So just kind of a depiction of something that helps me and I think helps us as we kind of work on our approach. One of my get better things is I need to pause more in between instead of hugging. So I'm intentionally trying to work on that today. So it feels awkward and long. That's because it does feel awkward and long. Next slide, please. Okay, so always thinking about what our value proposition is. And we talked about the mission, looking at our capabilities and capacities. Our people, do we have the right capabilities, skill sets, if you will? Do they have capacity? What are the supporting systems and processes to make those things work? And so it could be things from how are we doing budget process? How are we communicating all across the spectrum and trying to align those? And then always looking at what are opportunities. I had an old boss that used to drop his glasses to the end of his nose and you say, okay, that's a challenge, but with every challenge comes opportunity. He give me kind of a chest poke and say, that's your job, go figure out what those opportunities are. And so constantly trying to look at what are challenges that we have, but how do we have those opportunities as well, both internally and externally as well, going back to that operating environment. And where are things that we can take advantage of? And of course, across the bottom of all that is aligning our mission and our purpose and our value to make sure that those things are all in alignment across what we're trying to do and across the organization, and keeping our eye on the value proposition. These things I don't mean to imply we got all this nailed because it's a constant work. But these are kinds of the approaches and the thinking that we do have conversations on to think through. Next slide, please. So this is internally kind of how we're approaching these from an organizational standpoint. Some of you may have heard about the OODA loop, the Observe, Orient, Decide, Act. Those are more kind of on the tactical day-to-day kind of thing, but this is more from an organizational standpoint. Making sure we have the right purpose, mission, and strategy, making sure that there's a shared consciousness and understanding across the organization. So from up and down the organization, that we have an understanding of what that is, the why, and those kinds of things. And then empowered execution, making sure that we are delegating not only the authority, but also, or not only the responsibility, but the authority that comes with it and the accountability as well that goes to that. Really trying to think on doing only what you can do, and then making sure others are doing what they can do, and we're not trying to step on each other and duplicate effort and things which slow things down and so forth. And then constantly trying to assess and the information to make sure that we're going back around, make sure that purpose and strategy and so forth are okay. Part of that assessment is being a humble organization that we know we're constantly at work, trying to learn and grow and get better. And so how do we try to take that feedback? And that's that get better approach that we're trying to work on. That, the way to get better is to get real with each other. And that's meant from a way of trying to help to get better. It's not a criticism. It's trying to help each other. Not always easy, as we all know, in relationships and otherwise, but constantly working on that to remain that humble organization. Again, this is a constant work in progress. I don't mean to say we've got all this nailed, but it's a constant thing. But if we don't remind ourselves, and this is kind of why I think it's a good idea once a year for us as an organization to talk about these things, is to remind ourselves of what we're trying to drive towards. Next slide, please. So taking all that, and this next slide will work in coordination with this, but trying to make sure that our strategy, our structure, and our culture are all in alignment. And what I mean by that is you can have a great strategy, but if, for example, under capacity, which is the structure, if your organizational design isn't working to implement that, if you don't have the right capabilities, or people don't have capacity, or there's not the supporting systems, or as things are evolving and changing, we're staying the same ways we've always done it, even though life is changing and things are updating, your strategy, you're not going to be able to do it. If you aren't constantly working on the culture behind it, I can't remember what famous person said, but that culture eats strategy for lunch, and constantly trying to focus on that and bring things in alignment, so that it's across everybody, knowing what's going on and how that strategy, those structures, and that culture work together to try to implement. And hopefully that then gives us the high performance to actually implement a strategy. Okay. Next slide, please. So how does that implement to WTA in more kind of a practical component? So this is kind of oversimplification, but kind of what the board has been working with us on since 21, kind of this phasing approach. And obviously, when you look back on that, it's hard to believe, but that was pandemic operations. And so a lot of the things we're just trying to exist through, but nevertheless, how do you work on the culture, even during those kinds of challenging, trying times? Going back to that tree analogy, we know storms are coming. COVID was a great example of that. How do we work on that? But as we've been moving along, and the board's direction to try to think a little differently, how do we maintain our core capability of providing safe, friendly, efficient, reliable service, but how do we at the same time enhance and grow that while also helping to solve other issues that help us get better on that core capability? And so the board has been talking about things we've been working on, like rapid transit as a great example, working on property readiness of things to acquire, like the public market property, Bellingham Station, so that we can tie that to rapid transit. We can tie that to having transit-oriented development. Same thing with Linden Station. Both of those trying to work in conjunction and in support of our home jurisdictions in those locations. And how do we do that and develop those things in a manner that supports what the home jurisdiction is doing, while at the same time enhancing our core capability on service. And then, as we talked about, internal resource alignment capabilities and capacities. And then through all that, trying to work on succession planning as well across the organization. One of the slides you'll see later is talking about promotions internally to have people develop as they can kind of move through the organization on those things. So one of the things that we're seeing is we've been doing a lot of prep work in that middle foundational building. And so things like acquiring the public market, working on the rapid transit, and getting to a locally preferred alternative, getting Catholic Community Services and City of Linden and the partnership on that, those kinds of things. But what we're seeing is that as an organization, we're kind of nearing the end of that prep work phase, and we're going to start moving into execution. And that's where moving into, and Amber, if you could go back one slide, please. Thank you. That's where trying to make sure we're keeping that in perspective as we go. And so looking at things like how does our organizational design support our capacities and capabilities to actually execute? It's one thing to layer on a property acquisition to already existing things, but it's another to execute on a property development in a public-private partnership and these big, broad things so we have to develop those capabilities and capacities and those kinds of things. So that's where those two slides kind of tie together as an example. And what I think you'll see as we're moving forward is trying to move from that prep work into now, okay, we have to execute on things. So if you go to next slide, Amber, please. So that's what that's trying to depict in a probably oversimplification, but we're moving in that way. And but kudos to staff for doing all these things to get the prep work, the foundation laid so that we can now start moving to the execution and seeing those results. So that's our big strategic challenge. I'll pause there because I threw a lot kind of general stuff at you. Doing my slide. Okay. And the next slide, please. And this is kind of my favorite thing. I keep this in my office and look at it frequently as a reminder to never ever give up. And what that means is that as we're trying to do these things that we talked about, we're going to run into barriers. And so a barrier doesn't mean stop. A barrier means, okay, reanalyze. How can we knock down that barrier? And it also means checking, making sure that we're still headed in the right direction when those barriers come up, but it's not stopping. It's just don't give up, just keep trying, keep moving forward and keep trying to knock down those barriers to success. And as an example of that is, ran into a barrier on federal regulations on transit-oriented development that says you have to have 50% of your streets be dedicated only bus lanes to be eligible for transit-oriented development. That obviously doesn't work. It may work in Chicago or DC or something, but it's not going to work in smaller jurisdictions. But yet there's a lot of funding out there to be able to go after. And so credit to, as an example, Marine going legislative wise. It's one of the things included in the surface transportation reauthorization, thanks to Congressman Larson, Senator Murray Cantwell, but moving that and changing that to a frequency metric as opposed to a infrastructure metric that doesn't scale well to other jurisdictions. But just as an example of just don't give up and get those barriers. Thanks. So I think that's a key part of our approach on that. So that's the approach part of this kind of philosophical kind of thing on things, and I'll kind of transition into more of a factual kind of thing, just to level set where we're at. Next slide, please, Amber. Thank you. So talking about our service and our fleet. Next slide, please. So this gives you kind of an idea of this is out of our 24 service performance report. 25 will be developed throughout the year and approved by the board. So you can see some projected what we think the 25 boardings will be on there. According to the reason that the HOP is on there is it stopped in June of 24. So there was some category there on 24, and that's why it's not applicable on that. But that gives you kind of scope and scale on others. Next slide, please. And this breaks that down so you can kind of see percentage of things. And thanks to Tim and his group, the way they've described boardings and revenue hours and passenger miles, I think are really interesting to be able to see. So, for example, under passenger miles, the way it's done, why it's such a small amount of ridership, but makes up 8% of all passenger miles. So it's just an interesting way to slice and dice the information and see how you're looking at it and to understand measures of effectiveness on things. Next slide, please. Okay, so just a reminder on our go lines, where those go every 15 minutes, frequency. So done a lot of talking about these and the service allocation. And back to the approach, that service allocation is fantastic because as we're trying to best deploy our resources in the most effective and efficient way, these things are super important to do and how that ties together. So. Okay, next slide, please. These are just some of the challenges as we're moving forward. I think we've talked about a lot of these before, but these are kinds of the things we're trying to work through. In increasing cost of operations, trying to work through, and I know all your jurisdictions are facing this as well, but trying to keep things going when we have increasing folks that are on authorized leaves, requires overtime and some of these other things. So that's a challenge that I know we all are trying to work through on that, whether that's police or fire, or public works or whatever. So you can kind of see on that.
What challenges are you finding in changes of travel behavior?
I'll look to Tim, but what we're seeing is you kind of have the assumption that it'll be like in the morning and in the evening kind of thing, and we're not seeing those kinds of things. Like, do you want to talk about? You've done a lot of great work on how the ridership pattern more later in the morning. And
yeah, there's a lot to unpack there, but yeah, what we're seeing as far as travel behaviors is when people travel and traveling less, for example, for commute trips and more for different purposes, and that will show up. You'll see that in the survey. So that would be one difference, and one way we'll need to adapt is when we have when we need to accommodate passengers. For example, our Gold Line, the 331, many of the trips are happening in the afternoons, not so much in the morning. So we have service consistent throughout the day, but a lot of people are traveling midday in the afternoon into the evening. And so we're seeing things like that showing up in our service, beyond just kind of the global change in behavior. So I think a lot of it is expectations about service and about ease of travel and getting around places, and people have high expectations. So I think that's what this is referring to here.
Does that help? Next slide, please, Amber. So the next two slides just give you a snapshot of our fleet at this time, thanks to Kim and her team for all the good work that they do. These are kind of some of the useful metrics. How many buses or vehicles do we have? The useful life is super important to understand how long. And so as we're scheduling these out, we've got 16 new buses coming in. What that means for planning purposes is 12 years from now, our successors are going to be looking to replace. And how do we kind of structure and do those kinds of things on that? You can also see from that under the fixed route how our fleet is evolving. After those buses come in, at that point, you will see we will be well over 50% of our fleet will be low or no emission on that. So still trying to do what we can. And then when you combine that with the R99 sustainable fuel that we're using in place of diesel, we're trying to make incremental steps as we go. And then paratransit, you can kind of see what the breakdown is on that. And then the preventive maintenance is very useful to understand, because that drives fleet's workload and staffing and those kinds of things. And those are things every 3 years FTA comes in and does an audit on us to make sure we're hitting those metrics.
With the 12 years, is that an average of the different types, or is there, for hybrids, electric, conventional, is the lifespan a little different? We're looking at like a 12-year average, or that's just the FTA across the board?
I believe it's 12 years across the board, but I'll ask for Kim to.
It is across the board.
Across the board.
I had a similar question, but it was on the paratransit. 4 years seems, what? And what are some of the drivers that sets the number at 4?
That's an
That's a good
FDA,
part too.
an FDA minimum useful life, and they're a light duty vehicle.
And they take a beating. They're pretty much shot at 4 years. Yeah, we have to let them do that 4 year.
And they do a lot of driving, so they can go
They
from South Bellingham to Blaine, back multiple times in a
Yeah.
day, depending on how the demand cycle for that day is working. So there's a lot of-
They're at near 200,000 miles, but they do a lot of idle time also. So the engine's pretty much gone at that time. But, yeah.
Next slide, please. They can see the remainder of our vehicles on that. Okay. Next slide, please. All right, looking at finance, those strong roots, finance is key to that. Next slide, please. So this is a slide we showed at the 2026 budget development. Key takeaways on that is this is being driven by the 5307 dollars to draw down. That will smooth out because now it has to be 2 years. So we'll be updating this slide. So that's one of the things to take away. The other thing is what we've done down here is you can see what the operating revenues are with those $5307 coming in. And then those get shifted to the reserves, but nevertheless, it makes our operating revenue side look high. So what Shonda nicely did was break out, okay, without those funds, what is our operating expenses and revenues? And you can see those are off. And so that's why we continue to look at how do we rectify that. And there are structural things we're doing to look at that, including constantly reviewing what we can streamline, what's a need, what's a want, those kinds of things continuously as them.
What is the projected sales tax growth rate?
In the 26 budget, we had it at 2%.
2%. And the expense growth rate?
5.
5. That's why that red
That's why
line
they don't
spreads above
match.
the
Exactly.
Right. Next slide, please. And then talking a little bit about our people just from a statistic standpoint, so you can kind of see how they break down and so forth. Not how they break down, how the numbers. Hopefully we're not back to that culture thing. Hopefully we're not. Next slide, please. So you can see of our authorized number of employees where they kind of break down from our operators to the maintenance to the administrative staff on that, kind of see by percentage where that's allocated. That kind of makes sense based on our core capability, what we're trying to do. We do watch this one, trying to make sure that it's so how do you balance that important back of the house kind of thing that you need to get done? We all been to plays. If the curtain doesn't open or the music's not playing or the lights don't work, the play's not quite as good. So trying to make sure we have the back of the house, but also making sure we're not overdoing that at the same time. Next slide, please. And this is just kind of at a glance, so you can see how we break down on numbers there. One of the things to notice is from last year, and I'm looking at this, I should have put an arrow on that. The average tenure has dropped some as people are retiring. And that comes with additional training requirements. And as you can think about, if you're increasing your number of operators between 0 and 5 years of experience, when you think about any driver between 0 and 5, you've got to constantly work with them. I will, because we look at this as a continuum, complement and it's across the entity or across the organization. So it's HR ops and others that hire, and they do a fantastic job at hiring folks. And that continuum of hiring the right people takes a lot of time and energy. Bringing them in, getting them to the training department with trainers that are not playing hide the ball or the game of gotcha, or I went through a lot to get my CDL, so I'm going to put you through a lot, but rather how do we get those people? So the tough part is getting in and then working with the trainers to move through. And then how do we keep track of these kinds of things, give opportunities and try to treat people well as we go. And so one of the things is positions filled by promotion. And so what we're trying to do, we've got to, as you know, set up, we have sub expediters as an example, or sub dispatchers for folks that may be interested in those kinds of things where they can, as absences and things, kind of step in, learn that process. And hopefully that then sets them up for going into that, or they may decide, oh, I like driving the bus better than I like dispatching. As Dan's team knows, being a forward dispatcher, that's a tough job. So some may say, okay, I'm good. So that just gives you kind of an idea on WTA. Next slide, please. And that's it. So I hope you found that helpful. And we can continue to do this on an annual basis at the beginning of the year if that works for you all, if you find value out of it. Let me know if you don't want to have it on the rhythm for each year. Thank you very much.
Thank you. All right. So we're gonna have a little break. How long? 10 minutes? That works. Sounds good. All right, we will return at 9:21.
Yeah.
Oh, man. I'm on the cover page.
Seems like you get. We get by the
Right, calling the meeting back to order.
I don't need that.
I thought you didn't like to see yourself, Scott.
Okay, item H3, community survey results. Maureen.
All right.
Is
thank
on
you,
time.
And good morning. Okay, well, like all of the jurisdictions that you serve, we have multiple customers at WTA. The second largest group of our customers are the people we serve on our buses. And the largest group of our customers are our community at large, everyone who pays taxes in to support our system. So our community perception survey is an opportunity to engage with that group of people and find out how they feel about our service, how they feel about the role that we play in the community, even a little bit about what they value most and what impact we have on those things that they value. So here joining us is Justin Curtis from RSG. At WTA, we have a slight preference for vendors whose names are three-letter acronyms. So that's one of the reasons he's with us. And in all seriousness, it was great to choose RSG because they were engaged right back to back with our survey with Whatcom Cog on their household transportation survey. And in fact, we even have a sneak preview before even the Cog board has seen their survey. We have one slide from their survey related to ours at the end. And just in case you should happen to have questions about that one, we have also James McLean here from Whatcom Cog in the audience. So with that, I will turn it over to Justin Curtis.
All right. Thanks, Maureen. Thanks for introducing me. As Maureen said, I'm a consultant with RSG, and I'm excited to share the results of this community perception survey. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here and hope that it works well. Can everyone see the opening slide here?
Yep, good.
Okay, wonderful. So the agenda for this presentation is here. We're going to start with just a brief overview of kind of what the community perception survey was trying to accomplish. And then I'll spend a few minutes talking about the sampling plan. As Maureen mentioned, kind of the key feature of this survey is that it wasn't just riders and users of WTA services, but it was all of Whatcom County. And we used an address-based sampling methodology to get responses from across the county. I'll talk a little bit about how we weighted the survey to make it representative to the county at large. And I'm happy to answer more questions about that process if they come up. And then we'll spend most of our time diving into the actual data that came from the survey, divided into a few sections. And then as Maureen mentioned, I have one slide that my colleague who led the household travel survey for the COG helped me put together that talks specifically about transit travel patterns that they learned from the household travel survey. And then I'm hoping to have time at the end for any questions that anyone might have. So let's jump in. As Maureen, I think already mentioned, but the goal of the project was to evaluate and to begin to track public attitudes about WTA services. The goal, it really is to create a baseline and hopefully be able to track changes over time in perceptions. But just as a sneak preview, perceptions of WTA are profoundly positive across Whatcom County. And we'll look at that in a number of dimensions. We also wanted to get perceptions from everybody, not just riders. And so the sampling approach that I'll talk about next is our attempt to make sure that we hear from everyone in the county. So we used an address-based sampling approach, and we emphasized 3 communities. We emphasized Bellingham, and then the combination of Ferndale and Linden. And then the rest of the county we'll refer to over and over again in this presentation as rural, but it just means everywhere else. And the sampling targets for these areas were we wanted to get about 50% of responses from the Bellingham area. We wanted to get about 15% of our total responses from Ferndale and Linden, and then 35% from the rest of the county. And as the slide mentions, but we didn't just sample from the highlighted regions here, but from the county at large, everywhere. So here's what that looked like. As you can see, our targets here are based on those percentages that I shared in the last slide, but we were trying to get overall 800 completes to the survey. Half of those would be from Bellingham, again, 15% from Ferndale and Linden, and 35% from the rest of the county. We ended up surpassing all of our expectations in our actual completes. That's the orange row here. And in fact, our response rate was more than double our expectation, which I think is an interesting and important data point in and of itself. The survey recruitment materials were branded with WTA logos, and people seemed really excited to take the survey and provide their thoughts and opinions. These sampling targets are a little bit different, or these sampling outcomes are a little bit different than what we had anticipated. We actually got a bit of an oversample from Bellingham, which ended up in an undersample from both Ferndale and Linden. But in absolute numbers, we surpassed our expectations everywhere. And in fact, a 4% response rate in Bellingham is pretty remarkable for a survey like this. We did weight the data. The goal of weighting survey data is to make it representative of the entire population, in this case, Whatcom County. And so the survey data were weighted to match distributions of income, household vehicle ownership, age, and a few race and ethnic categories. These data came from the American Community Survey, the census data. And essentially, we try to weight the data in a way that makes the data representative of these variables to try and make all of the data representative of attitudes, perceptions, knowledge about WTA. If anyone has questions about the weighting process, I've got a few kind of back pocket slides that I'm happy to share later that show the pre-weighted and post-weighted data distributions of each of these variables, but we can talk about that in the Q&A if anyone's interested. Let's see. So now let's dive into the interesting stuff, the survey results. We'll start with just a few key demographics. I won't go through every demographic that we collected on, mostly because they're just representative of the county at large. But there are a few things that are probably important and interesting for all of you. The first is employment status. So we found in our sample that just under half of our respondents were employed full-time. We had a pretty high concentration of, or a pretty high response rate among students, but these were concentrated primarily in the Bellingham region. And then we also had quite a few stay-at-home parents and retired folks take the survey. Those tended to be concentrated in the rural parts of the county or everywhere outside of Bellingham, Ferndale, and Linden. I'll share a couple of other kind of key demographics here. So we found that 59% of respondents had a four-year college degree, which is a bit higher than the county average. We tried weighting the data on educational attainment as well, and we found that it didn't really impact any of the results. So kind of for parsimony's sake, we dropped that weighting standard. But we found that higher educated respondents were concentrated in the Bellingham area. And then kind of relevant to transportation, a key demographic, or to transit services, a key demographic was access to personally owned vehicles. And car access among our respondents was widespread. About 3/4 of our respondents had regular access to a personal vehicle. And it was lowest in Bellingham at just under 10%. So that gives kind of a snapshot of the profile of who responded to the survey. We'll now dive into the more interesting data. So one of the questions we asked was for Whatcom County residents to tell us what are like the most important pressing issues facing them and their community. And across all of the subgeographies, by a very large margin, the number one pressing issue was housing affordability. I think it's worth emphasizing that was the case across all regions, because there was some variance among the other pressing issues between regions. In particular, protecting air quality and the environment and reducing local taxes were both significantly different in the Ferndale and Linden area region. Protecting air quality was seen as a much lower priority for residents in Ferndale and Linden, and reducing local taxes was a much higher priority for residents of Ferndale and Linden. And just under a quarter of all respondents said that improving public transportation was a pressing issue to them. We then asked why people responded. So this is a question that was just asked of people who don't use WTA services, why they don't. And by far the most common was they have a preference for driving. These are probably people who aren't going to be enticed to use WTA services. But the next four reasons are all relevant to kind of factors that WTA could try to influence, right? That the wait takes too long, or the services don't go where they live or work, and they're not frequent enough, and it doesn't go elsewhere where they need to travel. And I think it's worth kind of emphasizing that only 14% of respondents cited safety as a reason for not using WTA services. We then asked kind of some high-level questions about opinion of the various services that WTA provides. We broke this slide down by the entire sample on the left, and then people who had used WTA services in the last 5 years on the right. A key difference is that there's a lot of uncertainty among people among the entire sample. When you break it down to people who use WTA services, they're much more sure of their opinions about each of these services. But I think it's important to emphasize that 60% of all respondents had favorable opinions of the regular fixed route buses, the most common service offered by WTA. And among riders, the favorability ratings never dropped below 57%. These are really, really positive opinions of WTA services. We'll dive more deeply into kind of some specifics in just a minute. We then asked people who hadn't used WTA services in the last 6 months what would increase their usage of those services, of public transit. And 24% of respondents said that nothing would cause them to use WTA services more? Probably worth knowing that about a quarter of the population is never going to use services. But beyond that, more frequent service and stops nearer to their home or their work were important factors that would increase folks' usage of WTA. I think this is a really important slide. I'm going to spend a little bit more time on this one, but we asked people about their beliefs regarding public transportation. This is kind of at the heart of the idea of a community perceptions survey. And we found that 50% of respondents think that WTA works really well. Only 20% say that it doesn't work. 86% of respondents support using tax dollars to fund WTA. That's a remarkably high percentage. This suggests that Whatcom County residents really value the investment, the public investment in WTA services. 85% believe that public transportation is necessary for a thriving community. 87% say that public transportation improves quality of life. And 92% say that whether they use it or not, they like knowing that public transportation is available. That is, I mean, by a margin of error, just about as close to 100% as you can possibly get. The value of public transit is extremely high among Whatcom County residents. Now let's jump into kind of more specific satisfaction ratings. We'll start overall and then get a little bit more specific. But we first asked just overall, how satisfied are you with WTA services? And given what we've already seen, it shouldn't surprise anyone that satisfaction is widespread and strong. 70% of respondents reported being either satisfied or very satisfied with WTA services overall. Relatedly, respondents reported having pretty strong knowledge of WTA services and of how they could use those services if they ever needed to or wanted to. Again, respondents expressed high levels in their ability to navigate WTA services and in their ability to find a stop close to their house. Nearly 9 out of 10 respondents said they knew how to find the closest stop to where they live. Getting a little bit more specific, respondents were most likely to be unopinionated in their perception of excuse me, in their perception of how well run WTA is. 41% were unopinionated here. But respondents were most likely to disagree with the idea that WTA services are primarily for people with no alternative. People see WTA as not just kind of a mode of last resort, but a mode that provides a meaningful service, even for people who could walk or bike or use their personal vehicle to get where they need to go. Perceptions tended to be most critical of WTA's convenience. 21% of respondents reported strongly disagreeing with the idea that WTA services are convenient. Nevertheless, this, I think, represents a strong valuation of WTA services among Whatcom County residents. We asked people how likely they were to use WTA in the future. And importantly, we found that 68% of respondents said that they would consider using WTA in the future. We broke this question down by income as well to look at differences between, these are pretty high level income segments, but low income, medium income, and high income is maybe how we could think about this. And what we found was that 83% of low-income respondents said that they would use WTA services in the future, but 55% of high-income residents also said that they would use WTA services in the future. Probably not surprising that low-income respondents were more likely to plan to use WTA public transit in the future, but even a majority of high-income respondents reported planning to use WTA services in the future. Either probably would or definitely would. This I think is a really interesting question that we included in the survey. This question asked respondents to allocate $100 across 10 potential improvement areas for WTA services. And there are a lot of ways that we could kind of cut this data. I've done it in a few different ways. So the areas that received the highest allocations on average were increasing the frequency of buses, extending the area and hours and extending the area and hours of service of WTA services. But I think another way to think about this data is to think about the share of respondents that gave all $100 to one place. Not a lot of people did that, but quite a few did. And the places that were most likely to get the full allocation from respondents, all $100, were increasing microtransit availability, and then a tie, that was this 4% one, right? Shared, smaller, or on-demand services. And then there's a tie for second place, which is 2%. 2% of respondents gave their full allocation to more frequent buses, extending the service area, investing in low emission buses, and improving stops and stations. Despite that being kind of the lowest mean, it was when it was given an allocation, it was very likely, relatively, to be given a full allocation of all $100 to improving those stops and stations. Yeah, I'm happy to answer more questions about this as we move on, but I think those are kind of the high level results here. So finally, as Maureen and I mentioned, we do have some early transit insights from the Whatcom COGS household transportation survey. This is just mode share by person trips in the survey. Not surprisingly, the car trips are the most prevalent mode share. But the blue bars in these graphs represent the share of transit trips made by respondents to the household travel survey. And in Bellingham, this is just over 2%. Outside of Bellingham, it's just over 1%, and averaging across the whole county, it's about 2.75% of person trips made on transit. Okay, I think that kind of takes me to my end. I'll just kind of sum up with a few kind of high-level conclusions before opening it up to some questions from the group. I think it's important to emphasize that respondents praise WTA's efforts to promote environmental sustainability, that satisfaction with WTA's services is highest among riders who say that services are reliable, cover where they need to go, and they talked in their comments about courteous drivers as kind of significant strengths to WTA services. Satisfaction with WTA services is strongest among people in Bellingham, but the survey suggests that there's demand for more services in places like Ferndale and Linden and more rural parts of the county. The survey emphasizes that Whatcom County residents care about transit, that they see it as a really valuable investment that their tax dollars are making for their community. But there is room for usage and awareness of services to grow, especially some of the smaller services that WTA provides other than kind of the fixed route buses. There remains a portion of the population of Whatcom County that is unaware of the full range of Whatcom County's services and unclear how to access them, especially these smaller services. The results definitely underscore a desire for continued investment in service expansion by time, by geography, and by service type, including microtransit. And just kind of as a recommendation for the future, we recommend that future survey efforts be used to track these changes over time so that WTA can respond to some of this demand from the people that invest in their services. All right, thank you all very much. Happy to respond to questions if there are any.
Thank you.
Can I add, okay, because I'm worried about, this is Scott, Mayor of Linden. So on slide 6, oh, sorry, slide 14, you talk about reducing local taxes. Can I get that data for Linden?
For just Linden? I mean, yeah, well, the data set's being shared with WTA, they can access it.
Okay, and then I guess on page or slide 6 of the 205, how many were Linden residents? Because I want to ask my residents for more money and I want to know what kind of wall I'm running into.
That's a great question. Yeah.
It's only 24.
Yeah, I don't have that specific breakdown because we grouped those two communities together in all of our analysis. So I don't actually know what percent, but I would guess it's approximately half and half. I think that's what our sampling procedure was. So about half.
On slide 6, so of the 205, 102 are Linden.
Yeah,
that's
give or take.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Yeah.
He wants name.
Right, I guess so, yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Michael.
Just some praise and a comment, Justin. I thought it was a really well done survey. I think you asked good questions to get at important insights. I'm seeing this as reassuring. What people want, if people think we're doing a good job and all they want is basically more. If we could do more, they're not upset with what we're doing. They just would like more of it, and that would please that middle group of writers who might be interested in writing more, and we can leave behind the 1/4 of people who aren't going to be writing, but nonetheless appear to be very supportive of transit and has a good impression of it. So I think it was well done survey because it doesn't really leave me with many unanswered questions. So thank you.
Well, thank you. I'm happy to hear that. And I would agree in your evaluation that yeah, attitudes are overwhelmingly positive, and there seems to be a lot of demand for increased investment.
Kim?
Well, just to highlight, one of the lowest on page 23, if we look at the strongly agree that WTA is a well-run organization as the board, I think we can reflect on that as an opportunity for some improvement. So.
I have one more place. So I agree that people in general would like to have more service, more frequent. Is there, my question is, what are they willing to pay for it? Is that in here any way that they would, I guess everybody wants more of anything as long as it doesn't cost them.
Right.
So, and so and if that isn't in there, is there a way you could craft, if we do a future survey, to find out what they're willing to pay for extra service?
That's a really good question. The question that gets at it the most is that allocation question, where we ask people kind of how would they like to see tax dollars spent. But this doesn't say anything about their willingness to pay an increased level of tax or anything like that. And I think that for the most part, people don't think about kind of their tax, that's not how we think about taxes. We don't think about taxes in this. So I guess the way I would answer this question is RSG does a lot of work in kind of figuring out how to set toll prices. And for those questions, people pay directly. And so it's easy to ask people, how much are you willing to pay to drive on this tolled facility? Transit, it's a little bit harder to ask those types of questions because there's a level of removal from payment to seeing the outcome, right? That's kind of how taxes work. It's possible, certainly. We could absolutely craft a survey where we ask people how much are they willing to pay. We do it in a little bit more sophisticated way, but essentially we get at what are you willing to pay for XYZ improvements, knowing that it will increase some tax burden. But I don't know that it would be as meaningful as it is in other contexts because of kind of that removal between paying taxes, especially like a sales tax, and seeing the outcome in transit service.
It would be interesting to see that as the cost of personal driving increase relative to perhaps riding the bus, that balance changes whether or not you will see more ridership. And that people will put up with less frequent service for the cheaper service of driving their car into Bellingham.
Absolutely. And I think part of that is like a marketing technique, right? Kind of being able to tell people, hey, it's cheaper to get to a central business district or an airport or these kind of special trip generators. It's cheaper to do it if you do it on the bus. Why don't you do it on the bus? And kind of using that as a marketing technique. There does seem to be interest in using WTA services to get to certain locations. And maybe it's just kind of a matter of trying to shift the inertia of, oh, when I go to downtown Bellingham, I drive and I park here. It wouldn't be that much to shift it, but there needs to be some kind of nudge to shift that behavior, probably.
I would also add that the cost isn't just necessarily a financial cost. Because I think there's some tolerance there that people will pay more, right? Gas prices don't necessarily alter significantly, except at a different level transit use, but it's the cost of driving in terms of time is also a factor, right? I think that's what you're seeing in larger metro areas where sitting in traffic, well, maybe it's better just to sit in traffic in a bus, for example, and the cost of parking or the inconvenience of parking. So I think that's another factor that's not just a financial factor that's important to account for.
Absolutely.
Slide 23, good value was pretty high. I guess I want to know, when was the survey taken, before or after our rate increase?
I don't know when the rate increase happened, but the survey was in the fall of last year. Okay.
I mean,
Well,
we're
it's
talking
still-
about it during it, but
yeah.
it hadn't, the vote hadn't happened.
It really hadn't been real public knowledge yet.
But I think we were in the midst
Yeah,
of it,
okay.
but it was before December vote.
Sure, okay.
Oh, go ahead.
Thanks, Justin. This is really useful information and very well presented. For the responses, were there ever any options for folks to add in comments or prompts for comments? So for some of the outliers with like strong dissatisfaction or strongly disagree or really high support, was there any additional data gathered kind of anecdotally from surveyors?
Not within those questions. There was an open-ended question at the end where people could share comments, and there were a lot of interesting comments that are they're embedded in the data set we've shared, and so you can peruse them. But we didn't ask lots of open-endeds kind of within the survey, question by question.
Sure, that's helpful. Thank you. And then this is maybe for Les, but just being new to the board, are there previous surveys where there's any similar comparisons that we can look at for any of these questions?
We're in 2013 was the last time.
2013, and I did do a pass through just to see how things compare, and in many, many ways, it's just spot on. There were a couple that I highlighted where they were a little different. Real quick, they're not super interesting, but since I looked them up, I feel like I'm sure them. There was a little bit of change with regard to the reasons people said that they didn't drive. There are more people now who say they prefer to drive. There are more people now who say it takes too long. There are more people now who say it's not frequent enough. But for the most part, it was pretty consistent with the survey work we did in 2013.
And what we're talking about is we need to do this more often than every 10 years.
Yeah.
And so we were kind of looking at this as like a baseline now to start and do it on a frequent basis.
Go ahead.
What's the timeline or frequency we're thinking we'd want to see repeat surveys?
We were talking about every 5 years. Seemed maybe a better time to check in with a report card from community. And we also have so many things going now that, it would be great to consider this a baseline as we are coming online with some of the big projects that impact some of the things that you saw people value the most.
affordable housing, as we all saw, was a huge concern amongst all respondents. So anyway, and as well as, with rapid transit, people learning about that, we have the fare increase. So yeah, I think every 5 years seems wise.
Anyone else? All right, item H4, paratransit overview, Chris and Ben.
I need 2 seats at once. Switch. She was doing all the time, but you know.
Absolutely.
Good morning. I'm Chris Gray, Paratransit Manager. Thanks for the invite to talk about paratransit. It's going to be a high-level overview, about 20 minutes long, and we're going to focus on these 5 things: what the ADA has to say about paratransit, the connection to paratransit and fixed route. We'll talk about that. It's a premium service. Our focus on efficiency and that some of the demands that are on paratransit. So the ADA, the Americans with Disabilities Act, passed in 1990, guarantees civil rights protections to people with disabilities. And how that applies to transit is a transit system, a public transit system, has to be accessible to people with disabilities. There's a few parts of that. All of our fixed route buses are ADA accessible. So the buses kneel, so they become level with the curb. If needed, there's a ramp that deploys. So somebody using a wheelchair or a wheeled walker can access the bus. Inside the bus, there's accessible seating up front that's reserved for people with disabilities, priority seating. There's a level floor with no steps until the back of the bus, so most of the bus has a single level. If needed, the seats flip up so we can secure somebody using a wheelchair in that section. If they choose to stay seated in their wheelchair or their mobility scooter, there's seat belts, there's a lap belt, shoulder belt that they can use if they want. And there's a button very close that they can use instead of trying to reach up and pull a cord to call for a stop. So by the ADA standards, our fixed route buses are accessible. But that said, there's some riders that have disabilities that are so profound that they can't use the fixed route system. Maybe they can get to a bus stop, but once they're there, they can't navigate the system in some way. So public agencies operating a fixed route system are required to have, they're mandated to have a paratransit system as a safety net and as a way to make the entire transit system accessible. So paratransit's limited to those with a disability, and that disability must prevent use of the fixed route system. There's an eligibility process for paratransit. That process, if you're wanting to use paratransit, it starts typically with an application or an interview, and if needed, our mobility team will meet with the riders or the applicants to learn more about how they can use or how they can't use the fixed route system. We call that a functional assessment. We also might be speaking with the applicant's care provider to learn more about their disability. And once they're in the system, there's a recertification process every 1 to 3 years, depending on the need. Everybody goes through this process again. It's a shorter process, but they have to go through the recertification process. And all of this is handled by our mobility office to determine if a person can use the fixed route system on their own all of the time or some of the time. There's types of eligibility, and so somebody could be partially eligible to ride paratransit if they can ride fixed route some of the time. So that's a high-level overview of the mandate from the ADA. How it's connected to fixed route, also defined in the ADA. Paratransit has to be comparable to the fixed route. Just
Question, Chris.
Yeah.
Sorry, real quick.
Yeah.
The eligibility, is that mandated by the ADA as well, or is that something?
Yep, it is.
It's a-
Yeah, and it's
okay.
well defined
Federal
inside
process.
the ADA. Yeah.
Great, thank you.
And a question on that same thing.
Yeah.
On the 1 to 3 years, what's the criteria and the difference between the two different or?
Yeah, great question.
time span?
So there's disabilities that can be, for example, temporary. Somebody's hurt themselves. Yeah, injury. So that person might go through a recertification process, maybe even 6 months, every 6 months to see how they're doing. We have a lot of riders that come into our system from skilled nursing facilities, right? So we want to check in with them more often, see how they're doing. That's typically, I don't know if that paints the right picture or not, or
And then somebody that's got more of the long-term.
Yeah,
3
right.
years, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Good question. Okay, so comparable service as defined by the ADA, the service area follows the fixed route. I'll show a map of this later, but it's the fixed route plus 3/4 of a mile on each side of that route. The hours of operation have to be the same as fixed route. And travel times have to be comparable to fixed route. So if it takes a person 40 minutes to go from their home in Linden to someplace in Cordile, let's say, on the fixed route system, then paratransit has roughly 40 minutes to get a person, get a rider from that same area to the same destination.
Question.
Yeah.
Do you ever do multiple pickups and multiple drop-offs, or is it always a single person?
Yep. Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah, we strive for efficiency to try to get as many shared rides as we can. Keep the costs down.
Chase?
Is the 3/4 mile also a federal mandate?
It is. Yes. Yep. Fare must be comparable. So if a fixed route, if an agency has a fixed route system that's fare free, paratransit must be fare free. And if the fixed routes or if the agency is charging a fare on fixed route, the ADA, knowing that paratransit is a premium service, allows for twice the fare as a fixed route. And historically, WTA has been at parity. And as we know, in September, paratransit is going to be $1 more than fixed route starting September. So here's the map that I was talking about. This shows all of our services that are considered demand services, meaning somebody needs to request a ride. But for this discussion, this is the ADA corridor. And this is literally the fixed route. This is everywhere the fixed route goes. That's the ADA corridor with the 3/4 mile buffer. So it's a premium service, and part of that, and I'll talk about a few different things here that make it the premium service or define it as a premium service. And again, these come from the ADA. So the ADA defines paratransit as being an origin to destination service. And what that means is if if a rider is capable of getting to the curb and us picking them up at the curb, and they're okay with being dropped off at their destination is occurred, then that's what we do. But if they need assistance from the door of their home to the bus, or if they need assistance from the bus to their destination, to the door of their destination, that's what we do. And that's defined as origin to destination. Along those lines, we need to park the bus, the paratransit bus, in a place that works best for the rider, if we can, if it's safe enough to do. So say for a building with different entrances, picture the mall, it might work best for paratransit to park in front of the food court, say, easy to get to. But if that doesn't work for the rider, we can't force them to have that as their pickup and drop off spot. So it might be JCPenney, it might be a service corridor if they work at the mall, right? If we can safely get in there, and it's not just for buildings, for any place. So it may work best for us to pick and drop in front of the granary building at Waypoint Park. But if the rider wants some other part of the park, that's what we have to do if we can, if it's safe enough to do. Alleys. So there's a lot of homes in Bellingham and Whatcom County, really, where the front of the home or the front of the building is not accessible. It's a lot of hills in Bellingham, right? And people can't get down those stairs to the street. The street works best for us all the time. But if the alley is the only place that works for the rider, if we can do it, if it's within our safety guidelines, then we're obligated to do it. This is an alley off of Potter Street near Lincoln. And yes, that's one of our buses sneaking through that very tight area there. Driveways, same thing. So works best for us to be out in the wide gravel area here, easy to pick up and drop off there. But if the rider is using a walker with wheels, they can't get across the gravel to our bus. So to make transit accessible, if we can, get closer to a door so a rider can access our bus, that's what we are obligated to do. Even parking lots. You know, I don't know of any parking lot in Whatcom County that's made for a 24-foot long bus to easily get in and out of, right? Sometimes they're hard for even cars to get in and out of. Another aspect of the premium service is assistance. Our operators offer assistance, an arm typically, for riders to get around obstacles, curbs, slopes, stairs. In this case, we're helping a rider down stairs. We've brought their walker down the stairs for them. We help with bags up and down stairs. So it's a pretty high level of assistance. And I mentioned earlier that we help somebody to a door. We actually help people through doors. And like this is a best case scenario here where it's maybe 8 feet between the bus and the door. A lot of times it's not this simple, but even in this kind of a case, it's guessing a 5-minute or longer process to help somebody out of the bus, deboard the bus, and help them into a waiting room. So, yes.
Sorry. Question from Jessica. Sorry.
Sorry.
There's a question. Oh, yeah. Sorry.
Is that time? So, it seems like there's fairly involved processes sometimes for boarding, getting off as well. Is that included in that comparable time, or it's like if this is a 20-minute fixed route, right? That
it is.
in that 20 minutes.
Yeah,
as well?
it's all factored in there. Yeah.
So it doesn't start once they're on the bus. It's kind of when you get to the location.
Well, okay, so yeah, I mean, to peel that a bit, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, Ben, but it's when we arrive at the location. That's kind of how we are defining the window, right? So if it takes some riders, it could take 8 minutes or so to get them in.
Yeah.
That 8 minutes is not included in that trip window, typically.
Yeah, it's time on the bus. How we calculate it.
Yeah. Yeah. So So it's premium service, it's vital service, of course, and to keep it sustainable. Ben's going to talk about how we're focused how we're focused on efficiency. And I'm going to hand it over to Ben Gamble here, System Administrator.
Close. Hi, everyone. My name is Ben Gamble. I'm an applications administrator here at WTA. Close. Got one part of it right. And thank you for the invite to come and talk to you all about the nerdy data side of paratransit, which I so love to talk about. So to kind of build on what Chris has been talking about, he's really been painting this picture of how complicated the service is from a perspective of how we offer this premium service, but part of that premium service is also from the greater lens of how we make this operationally efficient. So to paint that picture, I was inspired by Tim and Maureen last year, for those board members that were here last year, of their board game that they did with Fixed Route. I thought it was a really great kind of whimsical way to talk about service planning and understand the pieces that we can and the levers that we can move to change service. So with paratransit, we don't necessarily have that exact same ability, but trying to think of it in an analogy so you can understand kind of the complexities of everyday efficiency in paratransit. So starting out, we have 4 different factors. We have our demand, which is our trips. These are all trips requested by ADA riders. And on any given day, we have a certain number of trips. We have our resources, which are our paratransit buses, just simplifying it for this analogy, although our resources are a lot more that go into that every day: dispatchers, operators, mobility office, and a lot of people that support paratransit. But for this example, we're just going to say paratransit buses. We have known constraints that affect our ability to be efficient. These are things like locations, trip windows, speed limits, vehicle capacities, mobility aids and devices. These are pieces that affect our ability to be efficient, but we know about them ahead of time, so we can at least plan around them a little bit. And then we have evolving constraints. So those are things like traffic, weather, no-shows and cancels of trips, technology issues, rider mobility, health, variability day to day, and vehicle breakdowns. So these are our 4 pieces that we have any given day. And then what do we want to get to? Our outcomes are safe, reliable, and efficient service. And we're going to assume the last piece of our mission, which is friendly service, is just assumed here because that's what we do. So I'm going to liken it to Jenga. We're going to start with our Jenga pieces. Hopefully everyone's played a game of Jenga here and know how frustrating it is. So our trips are our blocks. And on any given day, we have a certain number of blocks and we're going to have to stack them. For our resources, that's a tower of those blocks. We have to arrange those blocks in a very specific way to make sure that we are putting them onto a tower. And that is likened to our paratransit buses. So for each one of our paratransit buses, we're playing a game of Jenga. So we're playing concurrent Jenga now. We're playing 30 to 40 games of Jenga per day, all at the exact same time. Now, on top of this, we have our known constraints. So these are the things that we know ahead of time, but make it a little bit more difficult. That's like playing Jenga with pieces that are all different shapes and sizes. So we might have a trip from Birch Bay Blaine into Bellingham that looks very different than a short trip from Bellingham to Bellingham. Or we have a trip that has one rider who is ambulatory versus another trip that we have 2 riders in extra large wheelchairs that are going to take some time to board. So every single one of these pieces is different. So now we're playing advanced concurrent Jenga. On top of that, there's still more. Is our evolving constraints. So these are things that will change throughout the day, and dispatch operators and the team have to respond to make sure that we're still keeping all of our towers balanced. So now we're playing advanced concurrent Jenga with opponents. Every single one of the pieces might be moving at one time. Pieces might be coming in and out. We have to shift them around to different towers. And every single tower must stay stable, but also efficiently stacked. So how do we get to these outcomes of safe, reliable, and efficient service? We need to know our goal in the game, which is to efficiently utilize all the blocks while maintaining stability of the towers. If we have too many towers, that means we have inefficient service. Towers are expensive. Paratransit buses are expensive. So we want to make sure that we're using as few resources as possible to efficiently provide that service. But at the same time, we're stacking a tower too tall and it tips over, that means we're either being unsafe or unreliable. We're starting to lower on-time performance. People are getting to their destinations late. So it's this balancing act of advanced concurrent Jenga with opponents that we play every single day. And how does that translate to the reality of paratransit service? It's that we must efficiently schedule, dispatch, and perform paratransit service while maintaining our standards of safety and reliability. Well, sorry, I didn't bring a bunch of Jenga pieces today. I thought about it, but then I thought it might be a little too chaotic. Any questions? Right. So how do we measure that efficiency in reality? One of our main metrics, and this is pretty industry standard, this is talked about through NTD as well, National Transit Database, and how we report, is productivity. And that's the number of riders per revenue hour in paratransit. And this is just over the last 3 years. So what we want to specifically point out is that you can see that we had a dip here in 2023. And you'll notice that the y-axis is pretty short, short per se. We have basically between 3.1 and 2.9 shown on that. So there's not a huge change, but as far as across the system, that does represent a very large difference in how we're efficiently performing service. The major factor that contributed to this was us opening the Birch Bay Blaine paratransit corridor in summer of 2023. So you'll see kind of over on the left side, over there, they're a pretty big, steep decline there. So we noted very quickly that we needed to address this in some sense. So in December of 2023 into January of 2024, we had a 3-hour dedicated paratransit efficiency training for every single one of our paratransit operators. That was about 90 people that we got in. So that was a significant investment of time and resources, but we felt like it was a high need to make sure that everyone was on the same page of how we efficiently perform paratransit service. Almost half of our operators have been hired either COVID or after at that point. And that led to a lot of people never seeing a bus that was extremely full or having to manage multiple wheelchair riders or riders in wheelchairs at one time. So we made this training dedicated, and we were really happy that we've seen our productivity significantly increase. And now we're staying pretty steadily around 3.07 to 3.09 at any given time.
And I'll add here, national average is 1.8 to 2.0. Yeah, so big pat on the back to our dispatchers, our operators, the whole team, CSR, mobility, everybody.
Yeah. I'll also jump on to Chris's point is that productivity is definitely an outcome of your service area as well. There's certain service areas that, for example, let's give a good one, like Island Transit that has to deal with ferries every single day. There's no way that they're getting to 3.0 productivity. But for our service area and compared to a lot of our peers with similar service areas, we're doing very well. So let's talk about ridership. So that's kind of the efficiency piece. Now let's talk about the demand piece. So we can be as efficient as we want, but it's all dependent on the demand that we get any given day in paratransit. So to start with, talking about ridership, I left in a couple pre-COVID numbers in here just so you can see understanding of where we are at now compared to where we were then. In 2019, we were doing around 215,000 ADA paratransit rides, and we have steadily increased since 2020, and we've gone back up to 196,000 paratransit rides last year. But the other important piece about this to understand is that no two rides are different, right? Every single one of our Django blocks is a different size. So those 196,000 paratransit rides that we're doing now are actually a harder strain on our resources than the 215 that we were doing in pre-COVID. Now that we have larger county ridership and especially opening up the Birch Bay Blaine ADA corridor, those 196,000 rides actually look very different than the 215,000.
What about efficiency since 18? Were we just as efficient back in 2018 or has that changed dramatically?
Yeah, so there's a couple ways to look at it. One, an important change in that time was that the National Transit Database, who we rely on to define what we mark as revenue hours, changed their definitions. So it's a little bit hard to compare. It's kind of apples to oranges. But if you look at purely a definition change, we're around 3.3 productivity back in 2019. So we were a little bit more productive. Our on-time performance has increased since then, though.
So we also did an educational effort to move some paratransit riders onto fixed route as much as possible, which would be great for the system, but it would also then leave behind the more difficult riders, the ones who may have higher level of need, the ones who may take more time to board. We would drive down our boardings, we drive down our efficiency, but actually providing better service.
I think I'm gonna let Chris respond to the fixed route.
When you say better service, you mean it or vital?
Well, they're still getting to where they need to go. If they're one of the people who's transitioned to fixed route for some or all of their routes, they're still being served.
Yep. Yes. Yep. You want to talk to conditional eligibility?
Yeah, so I mentioned earlier that there's different types of eligibility, and we have a great deal of riders actually that are conditionally eligible. That's the term defined in the ADA, where they can, depending on the conditions, they're eligible to ride paratransit. So we, like what you're pointing out, our travel trainer and our system is designed to help people use the fixed route system as much as possible, but there might be conditions, whether somebody might have a type of sight impairment where they can't see at night. So they're eligible for rides, under these certain conditions. I don't know if I'm answering the question though.
Well, what I'm saying is that paradoxically, we do good things that drive some metrics in the opposite direction.
Yes.
We do too. So I guess the question would be, how many people are we successfully moving to fixed route because they're conditionally eligible? Is it just like 5 people and you won't see the data, or is it like 5,000 people and you'll see the data?
Yeah, I don't have the numbers on that. The people that use both. Yeah, I don't have that. I can get it though.
Any other questions on this stuff?
The rides per year, is there also some data around the unique individual use per year? So out of the 196,000, it was this many people.
We do have that data. So you want to talk to that?
I'm sorry, say
Unique riders.
Unique riders.
unique riders.
So versus trips.
But we're talking about like roughly 3,700 a week are unique riders.
Oh, I see. I think I can answer your question.
Okay.
So unique number of riders that use the system at any one given time, we have around 2,000 per year, roughly.
Oh,
yes.
I'm sorry.
Yes. Okay.
We have roughly 4,000 riders eligible to ride paratransit. Okay. Of those 4,000 eligible riders, approximately 2,500 are using the system. Some people apply and never use it. Yeah. Oh, yeah, sorry.
So trying to understand that picture of not only what are the total number of rides, but the nature of those rides. This graph shows our total revenue miles by percent in ADA paratransit that are dedicated to Bellingham trips versus county trips. So this basically defines any revenue mile that we're doing outside of Bellingham city limits as county, and that's within the ADA corridor. So you'll see in 2016, our percentages were split with 76% of our revenue miles in paratransit going to Bellingham trips and 24% of those revenue miles devoted to county trips. And that has continually converged over time, where we are now at 61% Bellingham trips and 39% dedicated to county trips. So those are revenue miles. So although it's a much smaller percentage of the total 196,000 rides, the percentage of our revenue miles is continually increasing in the county. And we are on track to get to the 60-40% this year. And a really important piece to mention here is that although they have to be comparable, the demand in paratransit is not really capped in the same way as fixed route. If we put our ADA paratransit corridor on Birch Bay Blaine, as long as it's within that corridor and within those hours, as many people that are approved for ADA paratransit can request trips on any given day. For a fixed route, we know we are going to have 13 runs of the 75 out there, and we are not going to add on that given day. But for paratransit, there is no necessary cap for that. We could have 50 people request a ride in the day, and we have to find the resources to be able to meet that. Yes.
So there's at least two ways that these numbers could be driven in this direction. One could be that there's more origins that are now starting out in the county, or it could be then more destinations that are outside of Bellingham. I'm gonna guess maybe it's destinations, that maybe Ferndale and Linden are growing and there's more reasons to go there for, say, your doctor appointment. Do you know if it's more the origins or more the destinations that are driving this shift outside of Bellingham?
I don't have specific numbers, but broad strokes, I would say it's more of the destinations in Bellingham, actually. I think more people want access from the county to the larger healthcare and grocery stores.
Right, what I'm saying is I'm not talking about why Bellingham is higher than county. I'm wondering why Bellingham is decreasingly larger and county is increasingly not as small. I'm trying to explain the trend, not the imbalance.
I think that more, maybe I did not state it quite right, but I think more county ridership are wanting to come into Bellingham. I think that is where that growth is stemming from.
Origins.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. And some numbers specifically towards that point of where are we seeing that growth? The largest two are Linden and Blaine, actually last year. So the largest percentage growth year to year from 24 to 25 as far as revenue miles go is by far Blaine, growing at 21% still. That's a lot less than last year where it grew from around 10,000 to 83,000. But we are still seeing that growth rate very high, and we don't really know where that's going to quite plateau yet still. Secondly, Linden is also growing at 12%. And then as far as county revenue miles go as a whole, 7.2%. Now, when you compare that to Bellingham revenue miles down here in the lower graph, you'll see that the county revenue miles are still growing at a much higher rate than Bellingham revenue miles. So that's 7.2% compared to 2.5%. And then as a whole system in the last year, year-to-year comparison, we grew 4.3% revenue miles. Questions on this slide? So it's one way to, or it's one thing to really look at the numbers as pure numbers, but something that Chris and I wanted to illustrate of what 196,000 rides look like. And I showed kind of a similar infographic last year, and I kept out the spinning this year. I remember there was some spinning element last year that wasn't the favorite, but one way to still look at it though is just to understand how those 196,000 trips really look like from a perspective on the map. So these are all looking at where the destinations are, not the origin. So where are they going to? So we did 37,000 trips to healthcare last year. We did 27,000 to goods and services. That includes grocery stores, miscellaneous stores, food banks, and professional services. We did 16,000 to community centers and faith centers like senior centers, Max Higby, and churches. We did 11,000 for opportunities and support. That's things like schools, universities, government, social services, other connecting to other pieces of transportation. And 9,000 for leisure and lifestyle locations like restaurants, recreation, and entertainment parks. So you're seeing the map's getting very busy here. And these aren't all unique trips. These are unique locations, right? So you can see the larger the pin is, the more people have gone to it. So over all of the system, we visited almost 3,000 unique locations last year alone. So unique addresses, not even unique trips. The map is going to get very dense here. So on top of that, we're taking people back to their residential communities. So living communities, skilled nursing facilities, and assisted living. And then lastly, the map is going to explode here when we add in all the uncategorized locations of people's homes or other various locations that aren't common named locations. So this is in Bellingham, but here's also the 88 corridor into our county. And you see that there is a lot of locations that we are serving across the county as well. So going back to kind of this map here, when you think about it conceptually, and we go back to our game of Jenga, every single day we can have a myriad of origins and destinations in our corridor that we have no clue where are going to be prior to. And we have to think of all the permutations of basically what is the most efficient way to serve those riders in a safe, reliable, and efficient manner. Going back to Chris for the key takeaways from today.
Yeah, thank you, Ben. So yeah, just to wrap it up. It's paratransit is mandated by the ADA. It's limited to people with disabilities who cannot use the fixed route system. It's linked to the fixed route system. If the fixed route expands, paratransit expands. If it contracts, paratransit contracts. It's a premium service. It's fundamentally different than the fixed route service, and therefore it's more expensive. It's been pointed out, we're focused on efficiency to help control costs, but also it's a better experience for our riders, right, and our operators when things work smoothly, and it is demand driven. So, rider base will likely continue to increase as the population expands and ages. And yeah, that's it. And also, I'd like to put out an invite to anybody that wants a ride along on a paratransit bus for a couple of hours. Let me know. Happy to set that up. Yes, sir.
Yeah, first thing is, can you get us these slides? They weren't part of the packet that I saw.
Yep.
Secondly, I have had about 3 people give me some comments over the years, and they're 3 distinctly different piles of Jenga blocks. So different,
Right.
but in particular, they are praising the pickup service, but they are concerned about the return trip and how some of the scheduling. For instance, a person that I met for lunch at the senior center, the driver had told her, I'll just pick a time because I don't remember exactly what it was, that he would pick her up at 1:45. Well, he showed up at 12:30 or 15-20 minutes early and said, we got to go now. And that really threw her into a tizzy, so to speak. But I've heard the same kind of comment of predictability on the return trip.
Okay. Well, so there's a couple of types of trips, and a rider can request to be picked up within a 30-minute window. Okay. That might work better for the riders that you're talking about. If they don't, what they're hearing from the scheduler is we'll be there at, say, 12:30 or later, and it's a bigger, fuzzier window. Yeah. The other type of trip where might fit with what you're talking about is will call, and we allow will calls from medical facilities, and that's not a protected ADA ride, so they go to the bottom of the list. Everybody with a scheduled ride comes first, and a will call, somebody with a will call can wait an hour before we get to them.
I think maybe a better education would be a good idea, because these folks didn't have any idea what any of the policies were. So
yeah. Thank you.
I would like to just throw in that, working with people with disabilities for the last 13 years.
Yeah.
The last couple of years, there's been a little bit of that, just because of, the way that we have kind of restructured return trips. But I think overall, people are so much more satisfied now. There's much less of that, like 45 minutes, and that's been impressive.
Yeah. What you're talking about is we made a change in 2023.
Yeah.
2023, where it used to be just an hour or an hour and a half, depending on where you lived. And that was the window of time. And now it's quite a bit tighter.
Yeah.
Thank you, Aaron.
One thing that feels disconnected to the conversation, you mentioned that we were having a convergence this year, 60% Bellingham, 40% county. How does that play into the cost to deliver a paratransit ride? We touched on that a little bit in the fare consideration. Obviously, there's a significant difference. and the cost for delivery on paratransit. And when we talk about constraints, are we coming up as an organization and sustainability to deliver this service on some of the cost constraints for us?
Yeah, and it's a great question. So the more county rides we have, the harder it is to group rides together. And so it raises the cost. Yeah, longer trips, more expense, right? To go from point A to point B when you have fewer people on the bus to share that cost. Yeah.
So your question, it could get to that point where you can't provide the service, and then how do you balance out with the ADA?
Yeah.
So how does that affect some agencies across the country have reduced fixed route because they can't afford ADA? And so those decisions get driven.
Yeah.
Or not there, but
Yeah.
you could see it in the distance.
I also wonder if some of the pickup in rural areas is because it takes less time to take paratransit into your doctor's appointment in Bellingham than it would to take fixed route.
So if somebody is eligible for both, it should be taking fixed route. It's not a time thing. It's they physically.
No, I mean, I wonder if their decision is,
Yeah.
or like, oh, I can, call paratransit and it takes like less transferring, less thought, less time. I kind of wonder, not that there's any way to really fix that, but
it's tough. Yeah.
The certification process you talked about at the very beginning, a lot of different pieces to that.
Yeah.
Is there an average kind of time if like I wanted to sign up for paratransit? I might be able to access it in 3 months, or what might that look like?
Yeah, that's great. So the ADA says that we have to have a decision in 21 days or less. And the decision or the clock starts ticking once we have all the information that we need to make that decision. So sometimes we have it all in the application, and it's a week or two before they get notified that they're eligible. Sometimes it can take a while to gather all the information to speak with a healthcare professional. And then, yeah, yeah. Exactly. Yeah. Did you have a question? No. Okay. Yeah.
The 3/4 mile corridor, is there still a day a week that is open to the county?
So, yeah, one of the maps that we had, that very colorful map, right? Yes, but it's not paratransit. It's open to everybody. And we call that zone service. Yeah. And so on certain days of the week, East County is open for pickups or rides, what am I saying? West County, things like that on different days of the week. Yeah. It's served with the paratransit bus, but it's not paratransit service. It's open to anybody.
We are seeing the frequency of our zone service steadily decrease. It has decreased very steadily over the last 10 years, and it's a very small percentage of what's served on our paratransit buses. I not answer.
Yeah, anecdotally, we limit the times. It's not throughout the day.
Okay.
So there's a pickup time in the morning and there's a drop off time in the afternoon, and it doesn't work well for a lot of things that people need to do.
Okay.
It's only 1,254 boardings in all of 2024 for zone.
Jeez.
Just thinking about that great survey we saw earlier, is there any surveys on the demographics or preferences of paratransit riders? Are there places to look for a fuller picture of who's riding paratransit?
I don't know, not that deep. We occasionally survey the riders, but it's more, like how are we doing kind of a thing, more of a satisfaction, maybe 4 questions. But yeah, I'm not sure what the plan is for a deeper of what you're talking about. Yeah, survey. It's a good idea.
The other piece of that is, fortunately, we don't have these levers to pull with paratransit as we do with fixed route. So if you put out a survey, we can't offer more frequent service really, or increased times. That's dependent on the fixed route system. So it really does go again back to the fixed route service planning decisions based on at least hours and areas of service.
And maybe anecdotally, are there, do you hear at all about ways that we could make fixed route or options more accessible or barriers that are addressable to?
Yeah, absolutely. Planning's constantly working on upgrading our stops, so they're easier to get to. When we identify Samish Commons is a great example where there wasn't a fixed route stop. That building went up relatively quick, and there wasn't a fixed route stop right in front of it. So we did some reconfiguring to make sure that there is a fixed route stop closer to that building that has a high concentration of folks that use paratransit or could use paratransit. Yeah. So ideally, I think that's what the advocates that were involved in 1990 when the ADA was being written, right? Ideally, the fixed route system was supposed to be ideally fully accessible. It's probably impossible to do it, but yeah, the more we can get into neighborhoods and the many stops we have, the easier it is for people to get to and utilize the fixed route system.
I would also just mention too, Jason, since you're new, we also have a travel trainer who has come and spoke to this group a couple times, and his whole job, a huge part of his job, is to help people on an individual level with what were your particular barriers that would keep you from riding fixed route, and so people can get a really high level of support if that's transition to make. It's great.
Great. Anyone else?
Can I chime in from the screen here real quick? I don't know if y'all can see me or not. This is Eric. I'm the operations director. And I just want to say thank you again to the work of Chris and Ben in helping turn around that graph of efficiency for our service. This is a huge impact on our efficiency as an agency and the costs that we're outlaying to provide service. Over 1% of Whatcom County are active paratransit riders, and they're throughout the county. And that work has really helped us to meet that need without increasing our staffing because we're more efficient at what we're doing. And it's a testament to the operators and our dispatchers, our CSRs, our mobility team, and then the data behind it. So thank you, Ben, Chris, for presenting and discussing, and for everybody for the great work that you're doing. Appreciate it all.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
All right, item H5, it's Tim's turn, onboard passenger survey results.
Okay, ready for more information? So we did separate this from the community surveys just to give you a little breathing space away from survey information. There's the presentation here that I'll hand out. And while Fred and Brad are getting the presentations on the screen, I'll just have some opening remarks. Fred, you got that going up on the screen?
Yeah, I'll start that up right now.
While he's doing that, I just wanted to just say this is a companion piece to the community survey. So 3 surveys, essentially the regional survey, the community survey, which is the broader survey. And then this is really narrowly focusing on our riders, or fixed route riders. So there's a different audience here that we're talking about, but it might help for you to understand some of the questions I had earlier about, why people have different concerns and what they're concerned about our riders themselves versus just the general public. Also, I just want to mention the last time we did this was 10 years ago. I was like on a 10-year schedule, 2015, with the strategic planning process back then. So now we're circling back around and we can do some comparisons with that data. And the reason we do this survey is to really, I think, to understand who's riding, like demographics. Some of that you can get through the fare box, but a lot of it you don't really know who's riding. And then what people need, what they think they need to be able to ride more effectively, some issues they have with their system, what's working well, what's not working well from the rider perspective. And then also our assumptions correct about who's riding and why they're riding. So this helps us to sort of validate whether or not, what we think is true or not. And then to look at what's changed since 2015, if at all. So that's kind of what I think some of the the main reasons we do the survey are. And again, it's point in time, so it's just one snapshot, October 125. And so with that, Fred and Brad from the ETC Institute, they're well regarded. ETC does a ton of passenger surveys. They're very effective and efficient in their surveying. And so they're going to walk through kind of results of the survey. So with that, I'll just turn it over to Fred.
Thank you very much. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Somebody give me a yes that you can hear me, please.
Yes.
Thank you. Yeah, it's a little awkward because my full screen is nothing but the presentation. And so as I go through, what I'll attempt to do is kind of slowly go between slides because I won't necessarily be able to see anybody's hand raised potentially. But if you have any comments or questions as I'm going through, by all means, or if we get to the end, you want to ask it then, that's fine as well. I'm going to break this down into presentation into a few different sections. We'll kind of give an overall summary, then do kind of like executive summary, kind of the high points, and then we'll drill a little bit deeper into some of the items. And so with that said, my name is Fred Gazelle with ETC Institute. As Tim mentioned, we do a ton of surveys in the region and around the country. Arguably collected more passenger surveys of an origin, destination, or customer satisfaction type than any other firm in the country. And so we're well versed in this type of work. With me as well is Brad Carlson. I'm stealing the screen so you can't see him. We work together on this. I'm the PM. He's the field manager. And so we work together to pull this thing together. And so with that, I will get into the meat of it. All right. So what was the purpose of the survey? We wanted to capture maybe 4 different groups of question types. We wanted to find out the type of trip the individual was making. We wanted to find out kind of more about their general transit usage, find out some of the demographics, and then the most important part would be the satisfaction, importance, and service improvement section. And so that's going to be the parts that we highlight the most during this. As an overview, we utilized internal staff collecting data over the course of October on all the fixed route Whatcom services. We did weekday, we did weekend services. It was administered as a pen and paper survey, English on the front, Spanish on the back. And the riders were also given the option, beyond just the pen and paper, of a QR code that would allow them to participate in the survey online if they weren't willing to do it at that moment. So the interviewers had hand out questionnaires, asked the respondent to participate, receive the questionnaire back, do a cursory review to make sure that information was not missing. If information was missing, it was handed back to the rider, ask them to complete it, and then turn back in. Like I said, there's a QR code on the survey if the individual just wanted to go straight to the online version. In total, we collected more than 2,700 questionnaires. More than 2,300 came from the weekday. More than 400 came from the weekend. And so this is the first high-level summary. What we're looking at here are 9 measures of satisfaction on a 5-point scale from strongly agree to strongly disagree. And you can look at there's 8, and then the final is more of a summary statistic where their overall the overall satisfaction with Whatcom. As you can see, all but one of the metrics performed at least 80% strongly agree or agree. So that's really good. The one that dipped below that, but at least 2/3 of the riders strongly agreed or agreed that the buses arrive and depart on time. And so that was the one measure that performed at a lower level than the other ones. And we'll get into this more detail a little bit later on. But of the people who did not strongly agree or agree, a good bit of them were neutral. And so you can almost think about those as not having an opinion, which left the strongly disagree and the disagrees at a very low level, relatively speaking. Some more high-level summaries based on the usages, what's important, what needs to be improved. So we asked what were the top 3 service improvements needed, and we'll drill on this a little bit in a little more detail later on. But late night service, day service, Sunday service. The one that just missed this list was Saturday service. And so having having more service or service at different times is the main request for service improvements. Top reasons that riders did not use transit, and we'll drill on this a little bit later as well. And I'll stop saying we'll drill on this a little bit later as well, as I've said it 3 times now. But the main reason that people don't use it is because they don't have the ability to make the trip without the service. And so just looking at these 2 options here, in this case, 2/3 of the riders either don't have a car or are unable to drive. When you add in people who choose not to have a car, you get it up to nearly 3/4, or excuse me, you're at roughly 2/3 at that point. But then you also have about 1/3 of the riders who choose to ride transit even though they have a car. So roughly 2/3 of your market is transit captive, and about 1/3 of the market is choice ridership. How would people make the trips? Well, I'm going to start with number 3 here. Almost 17%, so almost 1 in 5 passengers, if not for the service, would not be able to make the trip. 1 out of 5 would drive it. There's another group that would carpool. But then roughly 1/3 of the riders would either walk or use some kind of non-motorized transportation to make the trip instead. And why can't people make the transit trips? Because this kind of goes almost hand in hand with with the service improvements. The buses don't run late enough. Roughly half of the people said that. The buses don't go where they need to get. And then the service doesn't start early enough. And so those are all in line, in generally speaking, what we see in other areas. More weekend service, more late night service, more early morning service is the thing that is most requested of the passenger base. So where are they coming from and where are they going to? So you can see here, you see home at the very top, you see college, school, and you see work. And so those are going to be your 3 most common place types. And so then when we boil this down into trip purposes or trip types, you can see that school trips, which is to be expected, make up the vast majority of the trip surveyed. When you combine home-based school, non-home-based school, and then the work school, you're looking at nearly 2/3 of your trips are school-based. When you look at the work trips, you're looking at maybe another 20% of your trips are work-based trips. And so you can see that, as expected, a very high percentage of your ridership is making school-based trips, a lesser percentage work-based trips, and then you're seeing a smattering of others, but mostly at a lower rate. How do people get to and from the vehicles? Well, in this case, you're seeing that roughly 80%, 4 out of 5 people walk to access, another roughly 10% transferred either to or from another service. And then there's a bunch of others. And so if you took away those transfer access and egress modes, you'd be looking at probably a very high percentage, more than 90% of people walking to access and egress the service, which is in line with what we would expect. Of the people who walk, 3/4 of them are able to walk to access transit in less than 5 minutes. And then when you bump it up to 10 minutes, over 90% of the riders are able to access the transit stops within 10 minutes. And so based on your population and where the transit system is situated, there's very good access for the majority of people to get to transit, not having to make long walks. As you can see, less than 5% of people have to walk more than 5 minutes, walk more than 15 minutes to make the trip. And so when looking at those making transfers, as we said, roughly 10% of people are making transfers. Of those, roughly 90% of people are transferring either to or from Whatcom buses. And the routes we're seeing most utilized for transfers are the 331, the 232, and the 29. So why do people use transit? We kind of talked about this a little bit before. 4 out of 9 people don't have a car available. Another 12% aren't able to drive, and another 10% choose not to drive. So when you add those up together, you're looking at roughly 2/3 of people being transit captive. And then that 34%, or roughly 1 in 3 people, are choosing to ride public transit. So that breaks it down a little bit further on the stat we looked at earlier. Once again, how would you be making this trip if transit weren't available? That 17% is still there as people would not be able to make it. You're looking at another, 1 out of 3 people who would walk or use non-motorized. Another 1/3 of people would either drive or share. And then you have a smattering of other options. The frequency of use. And so roughly half of your ridership utilizes it 6 or 7 times a day. Another 41%, 3 to 5 times. I'm sorry, 3 to 5 times a week, not a day. So in aggregate, you're looking at roughly 90% of your ridership riding at least 3 times a day. Sorry, once again, 3 times a week. And so the people who utilize your service utilize it all the time. A lot of repeat customers, a lot of people who are utilizing it, if not every day, almost every day, it seems like, to utilize to get to and from where they go in their life. How do your customers go about getting their information? This is a multiple response, so these answers are going to sum up to well over 100%, but more than half the people indicated Google Maps. Another third utilize your mobile app. Another third, roughly, your transit guide. And then you can see the other options that people utilize to get around. Those are the big ones. Bus stop signage, at least a quarter of people. So that's another one. That's a pretty large percentage. And this is the breakdown of the scorecard that we looked at the beginning. And depending where you're minimize this, all right. So as you can see, the strongly agree dominate overall. The agrees come in a strong second place. Then you look at the neutrals, and then you can see that the disagree and strongly disagree make up a very small percentage of the overall groupings here. And so outside of the, so you can see kind of the distribution here based on the different attributes. But the most important thing is those red numbers, which are the not good numbers, are at the lowest percentages and pretty much always 10% or less. This is another breakdown of one of the earlier provided metrics. Where would improvements be most requested? Late night service, daytime, just more service in general, Sunday, Saturday, going to different parts of the country or different parts of the county. Roughly 1 in 4 people are requesting that. And roughly, or 16% of the people are perfectly happy with the system. So, it would be great if that was a higher number, but that's actually a pretty good number, all things considered, knowing that people are always looking for more services based on their specific schedules. Why people can't make the trip? It kind of goes hand in hand. The buses don't go late enough. The buses don't run early enough, and they don't go where they need to go. You see lesser people indicating 1 out of 5 that the trip time is too long. That could be, they have to make too many transfers, potential wait times between transfers would be the best thing the most likely indication or the most likely reason they indicate this. And then you can see some of the other options as well. Select that at a much lower rate. And then kind of looking at the demographics of the ridership, as expected, a large percentage of people are students. So between the full-time and the part-time students, half of your ridership are students. When you look at employed part-time, full-time, and seeking employment, you're looking at another 50% of your ridership being employed. So half of it's employed, half of it are students. There's obviously some overlap. This is a multiple response question, but you're seeing relatively few people retired or other or stay at home. It makes up less than 10% of your ridership. So people are out there utilizing it for school and work primarily, or they are employed and students, they're primarily using it for student trips, but obviously for work trips as well. Kind of going back to the previous presentation, and I overheard you say, if people are able to ride fixed route, we'd want them on fixed route as opposed to paratransit. And you can see here that, 20% of the ridership do consider themselves to have a disability, but they are able to ride the fixed route service. And so, to make the most efficient use of the resources available. It seems like you are doing a good job of, I don't say pushing, but having people who can ride, who are disabled, riding fixed route as opposed to being or having the paratransit services necessary to have them get around the Whatcom area. Looking at some of the other demographics, age, as you would expect, roughly half of the ridership is 19 to 24 in that school age grouping. And then the group above that, 25 to 44 is at 20%, and then 18 and under are 14%. There's no way of knowing for sure, but I would imagine a good chunk of that 25 to 44 is probably at the lower end. Kind of looking at that whole student grouping, which is where you'd expect far fewer older people, only 15% of the ridership, 16% of the ridership is over 45. So definitely trending toward the youth. When we look at gender, and this is something we don't see much post-COVID. As far as I can remember, this is only the second survey I've done where we're seeing more females than males. Generally speaking, around the country post-COVID, we see more males than females when roughly it was thereabouts a 50-50 mixture pre-COVID. But here you're seeing a few more females than males. So that's it's an interesting finding for this survey. And then race ethnicity, you're looking at, and this is once again a multiple response. You're looking at roughly 3/4 white Caucasian, 12% Hispanic, another 11% Asian, and then going down from there, smattering of other races as well. In terms of accessibility language-wise, 28 of the surveys were completed in Spanish. The balance were completed in English. 95% of people indicated that Spanish was their primary language. Of the 5%, 2/3 of them indicated Spanish as their primary language. So 3% Spanish. And then of those who spoke Spanish, only 3% spoke English less than well. So most of your Spanish vast majority of your Spanish speakers also speak English at least at a serviceable level. Looking at households, as expected, you have a lot of youth, you have a lot of students out there. Household gets to be a little complicated when you're talking about students. You might have somebody who lives in a dorm with somebody else, with a roommate, but they might consider themselves to be a household of one, even though they have another person living with them. Maybe there's a group of 3 or 4 people living in an apartment. They might consider themselves a household of 3, but they might consider themselves a household of 1. So there's always the potential for noise in this variable, especially with such a high percentage of students. And as I'm saying this, the only other system that I remember where there were more females than males on the service was in Virginia, and it was a smaller system that serviced the University William and Mary. I'm drawing a blank on the service or the city name, but William and Mary, I believe, is the University of Virginia, and they had a similar distribution of females to males, where there was more females than males. Kind of go back to this income question, as you would expect, you're seeing the highest percentage of people, nearly 4 out of 9 people have an income of less than 15K, and then you can see it trail off exponentially in a negative fashion. It holds that nice kind of even curve as you get to higher incomes, the percentage drop, where you're looking at less than 10% of your ridership makes more than 100,000. So the vast 2/3 of your people are making 35K or less. Then when you look at household sizes, once again, that can be almost asterisk a little bit just based on the interpretation of your students. You're seeing 1/4 of the people in a 1 person, another 1/4 in a 2 person, and then as you get more people, the percentages go down. Actually, those graphs are a little bit off there with the 1916, but you can see as the number of the larger household sizes represent a smaller portion of the ridership. Excuse me. And so with that said, that's kind of the summary of the variables. And we kind of started off with the highlights. And so with that said, I'm going to stop sharing potentially and turn this over to questions. If anybody has any questions on any aspects of the survey.
Yeah. My question pertains to what stands out, and the reason people can't make trips by transit is that the buses aren't running late enough. And it's our most requested service improvement. And I'm wondering if we were able to parse that data by route, so we could identify if there's some low hanging fruit or an obvious route to extend hours of service.
Yeah, and I'll say we can do that. We have the raw data to be able to cross tab that information or any other information too, for that matter.
Yeah, so off the top of my head, I can't speak to specific routes, but yeah, that'd be easy. That can be easily detected, cross tabbing that information. And I know Brad's kind of has the data set open in the background, so I don't know, Brad, if you're looking at the data, if there's any routes that jump out as being those who, yeah, that might be a little more complicated than we can actually communicate here, just because you're gonna have to look at it's gonna be a multi-dimensional. So one of the variables being multi-response, you almost have to set up a system, set of binaries to run that. So I don't know if we can actually do that in real time, unfortunately. But as mentioned, that data is all available in the data set.
Michael, Fred, I got my hand up here. This is Michael.
Gotcha.
So there's a lot of students in here, and I'm trying to figure out how to adjust that because I'm also looking at captive riders versus choice riders. I'm wondering how many of those captive riders are students. I don't have a car, I'm a student, as opposed to I don't have a car, I'm low income, and this is how I get to work. Because I'm really interested both in choice riders for what it means about the attractiveness of the system and captive riders for what it means about our priority populations. And I'm still trying to pull the students out of that and see what's there. So for example, you indicated that we have a lot of low-income riders. So you said 51% of those low-income riders are students. So again, I would kind of pull them out to try to get the real signal of the poorest people. What can you tell me about students making up both the choice rider category and the captive rider category?
Similar question as the previous one. That's very easily taken from the data set. Once again, in order to do so, you'd have to categorize people as either choice, based on that one question, as either choice or captive. And then likewise, because the student status is a multi-response question, identify people as student or non-student, and then that could get crossed with any other variable in order to determine to kind of dig deeper into kind of how that performs. It's not something we can really pull together on the fly right now, based on the need to kind of recode existing variables to make that assessment. That is something that's very much tangible from the data set.
And I think with any of these questions, we can come back and provide you with that information. In fact, I did anticipate that particular question. I don't have the information with me, but I pulled out students to see income level, right? And it was a high percentage of students that had a low income level. So we can play around with those numbers as you need and share that with the board.
Anyone else?
I thought it would be interesting to compare. I know you had a question about the community survey, how it's changed from 2015 to 2025. So I'd say similar to the community survey, things are about the same. There were a few key areas where it has changed a bit. And some of these are, I guess I would say, good news items. One is back in 2015, 51% of respondents said one of the desired service improvements was more Sunday service. That's down to 36%. So that is showing our investment in Sunday service. We've done a lot of investment in Sunday service. So good news there. And then the other highlight that I wanted to remark is that one difference was reasons trip cannot be made with transit doesn't go where I want to go. It was 25% in 2015. It's gone up to 43% in 2025. So that number has increased, which is also interesting. Overall satisfaction was around approximately 95%. It's about 90%. So I'd say it's about the same as it was back then. So it's very, very similar to 2015 2015 with those few exceptions.
Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you very much.
Thanks, Fred. Thanks,
I
Brett.
guess we'll follow up. Yeah, if you want to follow up, Tim, and work with you to pull together what you need.
Right, item I, wrap up and next steps.
Yeah, so I've been trying to keep track of things as we've been going through, and some of the things I've got in no particular order. Bring back the reserve policy, including the graphical description. So we'll do that. Continue the WTA Foundation on an annual basis. On paratransit, look at are there ways on education of new riders and the policies and those things. Is there a way to survey paratransit riders? Take a look at that if there's a meaningful way with Fed said on limitations on that. And then numbers on transition. Oh, on the Michael's question about transitioning paratransit riders to fixed route and the effect on that on efficiency because you leave different riders to still use. So we'll take a look at those things. We'll send out the slides, make sure everybody has those. We'll parse out the service improvements by route, and then the student status, which you just brought up. And then the other takeaway I had is doing these surveys more frequently, so they're better, not 10 to 12 years apart on that, but better data. Am I missing anything that you would like to see? I mean, if you think of something, let me know.
Back to the reserve policy, because I had questions about that earlier. I don't like to save our tax dollars in reserves. I'd rather use them. And we already have a 25% operating reserve. And I guess as a board, that's enough money for the crisis of not being able to pay our bills. And why do we need a reserve on top of our reserve? I mean, in my mind, we did this 15 years ago. We wanted to have a fuel reserve. And it's like, if we dip into our reserve, then we as a board have done something wrong. As a team, we haven't been looking out far enough. And I think this group does an excellent job of showing us what this is going to look like for the next 5 years. And I don't think we need reserve on reserve. I'd rather use that money to give service to the people. That's the point I was trying to make earlier. So when you're thinking about it, be ready to answer that question.
Just to piggyback on what Scott's saying, is there any kind of an attempt to match up a operating period with reserves? Like, can we go 6 months on reserves? Can we go
25%? In here, 25%.
Okay, then I missed that. I'm new.
About 6
There's a 25% operating reserve.
Anyone but my.
And that's
It's 90 days.
90 days.
Okay, but this is the point I made last time we had the discussion.
25%.
90 days is a meaningless number because under no scenario would our revenue drop to zero and stay at zero. A more meaningful projection is, what if we had a catastrophic, say 20% or decline or 25% decline in revenue? It turns out if that's the case, that so-called 90 days can take you to about a year. That's what we did in COVID. Basically, we had a revenue disaster, but it didn't cut our revenue to zero. And we could have lasted a while.
No, you're good. I can see.
So, I mean, I don't think of our reserve as a 90-day reserve. I think of it as something that really should be able to carry us a year through a major downturn in revenue.
And Michael, you're right. It's 90 days if we had no revenue coming in. And right, if that happens, we're in a world of hurt. The state audit requires us to have 60 days in that operating reserve. So we can take that down a little. And then the other two reserves have our board designated. So there's no requirement to have those. So we can have that conversation. If all that money it would sit in our daily cash. We could use that to put out service. We could allocate some of it to strategic reserves. But we would want to be careful that we're able to replace our fleet. That would be the one thing that we might want to keep a reserve for, is so we can keep our fleet in a state of good repair. And also ensure that we are doing our preventive maintenance so we don't have a backlog of deferred maintenance. So that's really what those two additional reserves are for. We certainly can adjust what the levels are and play with that also. We looked at these in 2011, these were established. And then we looked at it again in 2019, but things are really different now. We have a lot of cash, or we're expecting to have a lot of cash from those federal funds. And our cash flow is good. So we could certainly talk about that. I can do some graphs and some things to show what it would look like from this time. And we could have maybe a more robust discussion of what does the board really want to do with those two reserves that are under your discretion.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Anything else? Anybody have any announcements today?
Between now and our next meeting, 17th or 18th, Transit Appreciation Day. 18th, right? Yeah. 17th, St. Patrick's Day. Yeah, that's why it's stuck in my head. So confused.
All right, we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So early.
I just remember.
So well run. Yes.